So you're
There's
on
no
now.
picture. Right.
That one.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, you're in. And then you come up on the screen.
How's your wife?
So it comes on red. Okay, and you'll be able to see yourself on the screen.
Okay.
And then obviously say your bit and then if you just
Yep,
and it
no,
go
that's
red.
fine.
Yeah.
There. As a
It
chat.
does, yeah.
Can it say her name, or does it just have to say chat?
I don't mind that, don't worry. So do I have to press something then?
This.
Until it comes red, and then speak, and then when you finish speaking, just switch. Yeah. Speak. When you finish speaking, press.
That's on and off.
So yeah, so when it comes to red lights on,
Yeah.
so you'll see yourself on the screen.
Yeah.
Then when you finish talking, so when it's red, speak, and then red, and then speak. Then when you finish speaking,
Oh, there you go. There, I have got one.
Good evening, councillors and members of the public. If I could have some attention, please. Thank you. I've just got a few housekeeping bits to go through. So in terms of fire evacuation procedures, there are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately, and the fire exit is located at the rear of the room. And we meet in the War Memorial Park. Members, please note that this meeting is being webcast live on the internet, and please can you all switch your phones off or turn to silent. I've also been asked by my colleagues to ensure that you've scanned your cards into the microphone units before we start. Thank you.
Good evening to you all. So we're going to proceed with the meeting. Firstly, please may I ask you to remain standing whilst I invite my chaplain, Reverend Canon Linda Scard, to come forward to say a few words. And can I invite those who wish to withdraw from the chamber during the prayers to do so now? Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to be with you all this evening in your new council room for the first time. As we stand, let us pray. Almighty God, whose Son Jesus Christ exchanged the glory of a heavenly throne for the form of a servant, we thank you that you have given Elizabeth, our Queen, a heart to serve her people, and have kept her devoted in this service beyond all who were before her. Encourage us by her example to serve one another and to seek the common good, until you call us all to reign with Christ in your eternal kingdom. Amen. Amen. Lord God, we give you thanks and praise for the freedom and safety in which we live, for peaceful homes, for justice and order in our society, for standards of truth and honour, and for all our rights and privileges. We pray for those whose work it is in boroughs across our country to maintain and extend these blessings, and especially in this borough of Basingstoke and Deane. We pray for all who are given authority and responsibility in the work of the council, in administering the law and maintaining the peace, in education and the care of children, in providing both for work and for leisure, in planning and building. Grant to all concerned with the planning of our towns such a vision of order and beauty that the health and welfare of all our citizens, from the youngest to the oldest, may be promoted. Direct and use their influence that together in a spirit of respect and humility, they may work together to build a community and neighbourhood whose life does honour to your name, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. These prayers we bring together in the words Jesus himself taught us to say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Reverend Canon, thank you very much. Everybody, we can now all sit and wait for the... that was lovely, thank you. Brilliant. Right, is everybody back in that we know of? Yes, brilliant. Okay, so we're going to start with the agenda, and the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I currently have down on the list Councillor Jeans, Mahaffey, Robinson and Follett Maitland. Are there any other additions? Councillor McCormick. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Grant is medically unable to attend in person.
Okay, sorry to hear that. Okay, and Councillor James.
Councillor Mackay sends his apologies, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And that's it. Okay, thank you very much. So we move on to the second item of the agenda, which is the declarations of interest. There are no updates, so it's as set out in the agenda. Are there any interests regarding items on the agenda that members wish to declare? No? Okay, thank you very much. We move on to item number 3, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of July. There's no update, so it's as per the agenda that was sent out. These are on pages 11 to 25. Is everybody happy? And if so, I will move that they are a correct record and sign them. Agreed? Agreed. Fabulous, thank you. Right, announcements. We've got a very full agenda, as I'm sure you're all aware tonight, and I'm not going to speak for long, but I just want to say that these last 3 months have been the beginning of the Great Awakening, and it has been a joy to return to normality. I liken my year to thus far as walking through Alice in Wonderland's looking glass and discovering a new world and meeting people doing extraordinary things for the betterment of our society. It is a huge privilege to meet so many residents being a force for good, and I am in awe at how many wonderful people we have in our communities who do amazing things. Huge congratulations and thanks to Ian Ahern and his team and all the performers who were part of this year's Basingstoke Variety Show at the Anvil, which was a couple of weeks ago. It was brilliant and I loved every minute. We are so lucky to have so many talented children and young adults in this borough. I want to say a big thank you to the much-loved Anvil and the Haymarket. It has been a joy to attend live performances. We particularly enjoyed the Wind in the Willows performed by the Basingstoke Amateur Operatic Society, otherwise known as BAOS, and it was directed by the hugely talented Adam Bayou at the Haymarket. It was an outstanding performance, so many congratulations to the cast. We have been, and when I say we, I'm talking about the consort and myself, have been warmly welcomed by different black and ethnic minorities. And a particular thanks goes to Kishore Patel of the Basingstoke Hindu Society, Pastor P.J. Lawal of Praise Embassy, whose choir were amazing at my civic service at St. Michael's Church, and Nsema Uda of the Basingstoke African and Caribbean Catholic Association for their generosity of spirit. Thank you. I have a couple of events coming up which I hope you can come to. I am hosting a business forum at lunchtime on the 28th of October at the Arc. The purpose is to focus on the key themes facing businesses based in our borough, including economic recovery, climate change, and harnessing community action post-COVID-19. We've got a brilliant keynote speaker called Neil Dwayne, who was the global strategist for Allianz Global Investors until recently, who will talk about Crystal Maze looking into 2022. And we also have the Remembrance Sunday service by the memorial here at our civic offices, which will be on the 14th of November. And it would be lovely to see as many of you there as possible to support our veterans, our associations, our cadet services, our scouts, our wonderful community that we're blessed to live with. So thank you very much. Chief Executive, do you have any announcements?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And Leader, do you have any announcements?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, we move on to agenda item number 5, which is questions from the members of the public. As you are all aware, we've received a large number of questions from the public, and we welcome you all. And we thank you for coming this evening, and thank you for engaging in our local democracy. For our democracy is very precious, and we must treasure it. You each have 2 minutes in total, and after that you can ask a supplementary question, but it must arise directly out of your question or the reply that you receive from the relevant cabinet member who has responded to you. So if we could start with question number 1, which was on the agenda, and it is Mr. Basham. Please could you ask your question, Mr Basham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I feel like I'm standing in the dock. My question regards infrastructure requirements to support new housing. At the public meeting, Protecting Our Natural Environment, on 23rd of September 2021 at Old Basing Village Hall, Thames Water told our MP, Maria Miller, that Basingstoke is one of only a few locations where they would not recommend any more building due to the fragile state of the local water infrastructure. Can the council please explain to me exactly how they intend to work with Thames Water to ensure that they put the right infrastructure in before new housing, in particular, so that we do not face what I believe the consequences will be, which is sewage on our streets and water rationing across the borough. And this is not hosepipe bans, this is proper rationing as I understand it.
Thank you, Mr Basham. And Councillor Bound, will you respond, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank Mr Basham for his question. Thames Water's...
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Thames Water's public response to the local planning issues and options consultation set out that the total development identified in sewerage catchments draining to Basingstoke sewerage treatment works would cause concern if all developments were to go ahead. However, this was based on all sites promoted through the process, which well exceeds the amount of new development required for the local plan update. Thames Water also highlighted that developments in Basingstoke are likely to require upgrades to the wastewater network, and it is recommended that developers and the local planning authority liaise with Thames Water at the earliest opportunity to agree a housing and infrastructure phasing plan. This will be developed as the spatial strategy evolves. Consultants ACOM have been carrying out a waste cycle study for the borough and have been liaising with Thames Water throughout the process alongside officers of Basingstoke and Deane. The draft water cycle study indicates that Basingstoke wastewater treatment works has sufficient capacity to treat the additional wastewater flows from proposed growth in the borough. Thames Water have been consulted on this draft and not commented to the contrary. Through the process to date, they have not stated that more development should not be allowed at Basingstoke. South East Water supply water to Basingstoke, and their water resource management plan sets out how there will be adequate water supplies to cater for proposed growth. Liaison will continue with Thames Water through the finalising of the water cycle study and the progression of the local plan update. Once the spatial strategy is further developed, the specific site allocations and the housing number set out in any draft local plan update, Thames Water will be able to comment further on more specific proposals. They will continue to be consulted throughout the progress of the process, enabling advance warning of potential infrastructure requirements. The issue of the actual timing of the water infrastructure provision alongside new development was raised through the issues and options consultation, and officers have also discussed this with Thames Water. The issue is being considered further through the review of the water policies in the local plan update, and Thames Water have indicated that they will invest in infrastructure when development is certain to go ahead, i.e. at the time of a planning consent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Band. Mr Basham, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do, but I just feel a bit confused. Mr Bound said that everything's tickety-boo and in hand, yet representatives from Thames Water are telling our MP that's not the case for any new housing, not all new housing, and they're obviously quite different.
You need to find a question, I'm afraid, and because we've got so many questions, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Mr
I just
Basham.
think, what's the next step to resolve this difference of opinion? Because I believe Maria Miller said at the same meeting that Basingstoke these are exceptional circumstances for Basingstoke. How does the portfolio holder intend to take that forward?
Brilliant, Mr Basham. Councillor Bound, if you could be brief as well, because we've got such a big agenda, please.
I think simply to say, I think that's a matter for Thames Water, and certainly officers sought that clarification, so perhaps we can get the clarification to Mr. Basham.
Brilliant, thank you very much, and have a nice evening, Mr. Basham, thank you. Right, we now move on to the updated agenda where we have a lot more questions. The question number 2 is from Mr. Beavers. Good evening, Mr. Beavers. Please may you ask your question.
Good evening, councillors. What action is the portfolio holder going to take to redress the appalling experiences of nature volunteers over abandoned end-of-season grass clearance, inadequate equipment and staff, and a litany of systemic problems? None of the areas in Kempshott, Beggarwood and Hatch Warren, cared for by volunteers for years, have had essential grass cutting and removal, especially before autumn rains. There have been indications that nothing may be done this year. There has been no forewarning or collaboration, so no backup action proposed, just abandonment. Volunteers have been increasingly constrained by a top-down burden of bureaucracy and a squeeze on their freedom of action to do more. The only service provider available is unaccountable to communities or to councillors, only to Cabinet. Despite long years of volunteering, the annual requirements of community-based volunteers are being subordinated to the BIS project, whose approach, activities and results are not only opaque, but demonstrate how council control is being used to push aside community volunteering. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beaver. Councillor Fell, would you like to respond?
Madam Mayor, can I thank Mr Beavers for his question and analyse that the essential point he is asking about is communication between the council and volunteers. It was perhaps about 4 years ago that Mr Beavers and others raised concerns over the council's relationship with volunteers, but those volunteers being people who manage the council-owned land, not their own land, obviously. The problems arose at that time over safety, it being the council who risks becoming liable if a volunteer, with the council's permission to work, injures themselves. So someone somewhere within the council decided at that time that they weren't allowed to use any power tools on council land. And I said at the time I felt that was ridiculous, and we sought to broker a compromise, allowing volunteers to have training, to perhaps work for an organisation that had their own insurance and seeking some form of indemnification. And I felt that that was reaching a good solution before we had the pandemic. The second problem of concern that was raised with us was not understanding how volunteers were managing the land, and they were managing it well. And I had many conversations with Natural Basingstoke and with Mr Beavers, and indeed the BIS project came out of that to try and to protect and develop the good work that they had done. But of course, all of that communication stopped, that face-to-face communication stopped with the pandemic. So then we had the pandemic, and the two main officers who were dealing with the volunteers have left. And we're in the process of recruiting them as we speak. And as soon as they have been recruited, I will set up the meetings to meet with Mr Beavers and others so that we can rectify the communication problems that have arisen in the medium term.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fell. Mr Beavers, would you like to have follow-up?
Yes, please. I think it's more than communication. I would just like to ask the portfolio holder if he will engage with groups on service delivery and accountability and discuss frameworks that can strengthen community engagement and responsibilities. Thank you.
Well, the answer is yes, definitely.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Have a nice evening, Mr Beavers. Question number 3 is going to be taken by Councillor Nick Robinson. I understand you are acting on behalf of Sherfield Parish Council. Please may you ask your question. And the question is addressed to Councillor Band.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And as you've already said, I'm reading this out on behalf of Sherfield Parish Council. I've had no input whatsoever into the contents, and it does not reflect in any way my personal views. The updated local plan indicates that we should retain individuality, identity and character whilst respecting infrastructure constraints, with regards to local villages and parishes. Why then has the Borough Council identified and shortlisted the following sites? Wildmoor Lane, Garden Centre, Sherfield Hill Farm, land north of Redlands for development. Why does the Council not consider the environmental impact of proposing to build any houses in the River Loddon and Lyde Valley as significant when Thames Water has already identified the water quality to be poor due to the level of phosphates and nitrates found in these water courses, and sewage treatment works are already running at capacity? How can the thought of building in excess of 600 houses adjacent to the A33 be considered as sustainable when there is no proposal for added infrastructure in the form of doctors, dentists or schools to support the occupants of these houses without the need to drive somewhere or cross the A33? Why have these proposed developments been identified or accepted for development where they clearly utilise green space, usable farmland and destroy the fragile strategic gap between Basingstoke, Sherfield and Loddon and Church End? How can the Council propose the requirement for an additional 35 houses within the Sherfield and Loddon parish settlement boundary in addition to these other developments when there is no available space within the SPB? Why, when all these proposed sites fall within Sherfield and Loddon parish boundary, are they identified as being part of Basingstoke? Thank you. And there won't be a supplementary because I didn't write it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Robinson. Do you have a response, Councillor Band?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to thank Sherfield Parish Council for their question. The local plan update will need to allocate new greenfield sites. Sadly, that is what is required to meet our future housing needs. Following the completion of a detailed site assessment process, which considered a wide variety of relevant criteria, including impacts on the borough's environmental assets, a number of promoted sites were shortlisted for further consideration through the local plan update process to meet future needs. The impact on current gaps has been considered through this process. Further consideration will be given to the shortlisted sites and some may be removed as the strategy develops further. Impact on water quality has also been considered through the site assessment process and will be considered further as the water cycle study is finalised. Potential infrastructure constraints have again been considered in the site assessment process. Again, future infrastructure requirements associated with new development will be identified through the local plan update process and captured in the infrastructure delivery plan and relevant site policies. A transport assessment is being completed which will model the impact of proposed development levels on the local plan process and form evidence for the creation of a draft. The A33, where highlighted, where mitigation may be required, and that will be identified by this study and consider potential alternatives to the car on this corridor. The availability of sites in smaller villages is currently being considered through the settlement study work due to be discussed at EPH committee in the November meeting. Housing allocation numbers may be reduced where sites are limited. Sites that are well related to Basingstoke and have a close functional relationship that I would describe as looking to Basingstoke have been labelled as Basingstoke sites no matter which parish they are in. They are being considered as Basingstoke sites because they will in effect be Basingstoke extensions for the planning process. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Band. Right, we move on to question 4. Good evening, Ms Brown. Please could you come forward and ask your question?
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Following the Women's Equality Party Basingstoke's proposal in March that this council become white ribbon accredited, we are absolutely delighted to see the motion today and thank everyone involved. We urge all councillors to vote it through, and we believe that the next step must include an independent inquiry into misogyny in every police force. Misogynistic behaviour in the police creates an environment where sexual violence is normalised and further embedded by a culture of impunity. There have been 15 women killed by male police officers since 2009. And here in Basingstoke, 6 police officers were found guilty of gross misconduct last year, having been recorded describing women using misogynistic profanity that we cannot use in this room whilst this meeting is broadcast to the public. Anyone wishing to see for themselves how these officers dealt with the women that they were paid to protect can look at our white ribbon proposal, which was reposted on our Facebook and Twitter feeds at Web Basingstoke, that's the handle, this morning. We do not believe that the only 6 bad police officers in Hampshire coincidentally ended up in a room together. We are extremely concerned that this behaviour went on for 2 years before it was dealt with. 38 sexual assault claims were made against male Hampshire constabulary officers between 2016 and 2020. Nationwide, almost 2,000 officers have been accused of sexual misconduct in those 4 years, but 2/3 faced no action. And the new policing bill includes a statutory serious violence prevention duty from which violence against women and girls is omitted. Action is not being taken at government level or by police services, so it must be taken locally. Our question is, will this council commit to supporting We Basingstoke in campaigning for an inquiry into systemic misogyny within Hampshire Police by writing to Hampshire PCC Donna Jones and Basingstoke's MP Maria Miller to ask for such an inquiry? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Brown. Councillor Bowen, would you like to respond?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and I'd like to thank Priya for her question. I believe it is appropriate for the concerns that are raised in this question to be addressed to the Chief Constable and to the Police and Crime Commissioner, Donna Jones. Donna had a letter published on this topic in the Times on October the 12th, which said, "As the National Lead for Victims, I was alarmed to read sex claims against 2,000 police officers," an article that was published on the 11th of October. No one can deny this is an issue, especially in the Met Police, and one that needs to be taken seriously. Women and girls need to have faith in policing's ability to keep them safe. Recent events, including the tragic death of Sarah Everard, have seriously affected the public's confidence. To rebuild the public's trust, policing must demonstrate robust and swift action where allegations are made. To do this, we need police officers and staff to feel confident about speaking up and reporting inappropriate behaviours. All forces need to do more to reassure officers that they can and should report concerns without fear of retribution. Equally important, the public need to see this happening. I believe Donna has been very clear in this letter, and as the chair of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Police and Crime Panel, I will convey the concerns raised in this question to her and ensure that the Police and Crime Panel hears in public both her response and how she will ensure that Hampshire Constabulary will achieve this essential standard of confidence. I also make an offer to Priya to convene a meeting between myself, her and the Police and Crime Commissioner. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bound. Ms Brown, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you very much, Councillor Bound. So the extra supplementary question is, should the white ribbon motion this evening be successful, will the council agree to include a branch officer of We Basingstoke and a local Stop Domestic Abuse representative in the white ribbon working group as per our proposal?
Thank you, Priya, for the question. The Community Safety Partnership has been working on these issues for some time, and what I'll do is I'll consider how I can perhaps engage with your party in that process.
Thank you very much, Ms Brown. Have a lovely evening. Right, we move on to question number 5. Good evening, Mr Lee. Please, could you ask your question? Just one other thing. Councillor Robinson is unwell, you might have heard, so he will not be responding to your question. It will be Councillor Golding.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had assumed he was still playing Jenga with the Prime Minister at Conservative Party conference, but I'm just wondering what preparations are being made by the Council to mitigate the £20 per week cut in universal credit that's going to affect 11,000 residents in Basingstoke and Deane in the biggest overnight cut to benefit since the creation of the welfare state after the Second World War. Thank you.
Excellent. Councillor Golding, would you like to respond, please?
Thank you. The £20 universal credit uplift was introduced as one of a number of temporary measures to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. It was introduced for 1 year only for universal credit and working tax credit claimants, and then extended for a further 6 months. Although working tax credit was not extended, instead a one-off additional £500, equivalent to £20 per week, was paid. The Council's relevant teams, primarily the Housing Benefits and Housing and Social Inclusion teams, have been preparing for the removal of the temporary uplift. This work has included ensuring all relevant staff have necessary up-to-date training on welfare and benefits advice, working alongside partners to identify potential court cases to ensure awareness of the change and that access or signposting to the necessary support is available. Disseminating that information throughout partnerships and networks within the Social Inclusion Partnership regarding the range of supports and options available, to include, for example, employment and skills training. Further, we are ensuring that there are sufficient staff resources to provide this vital support and advice to residents. The portfolio holder is able to confirm that the Council is increasing the numbers of permanent homelessness prevention officers within our Housing and Social Inclusion Service to ensure that we can continue to provide excellent advice and support for those in need and deal with any increases in caseloads.
Thank you, Councillor Golding. Mr. Lee, would you like to ask a supplementary?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To be honest, I did have a supplementary, but much of what was going to be asked was answered within that response, which was to do with being able to kind of communicate it to the general public, making sure that you're using the use of channels.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a nice evening. Right, we move on to question number 6. Good evening, Ms. Vincent. I understand you are reading this question out on behalf of Mr. Blois. Please, can you come to the mic and ask the question? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Borough is using an outdated baseline for its household projections, i.e. 2014. In the absence of the 2021 census and using the projections available for 2018, a more accurate projection is required. Using the 2018 projection will give an increase in dwellings for 2021 to 2031, 74,229 to 76,777, i.e. 255 dwellings per annum. If we use the 2018 affordability ratio of 9.5, we require just 342 dwellings per annum. This is quite a difference and suggests in our case that the baseline is flawed. Does the Council reject setting the housing target based on flawed data?
Thank you very much, Ms. Vincent. Councillor Bound, I believe you're the portfolio holder responsible.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank Evelyn for asking the question. Our starting point in the Council's draft housing number has been informed by the standard method calculation, which there has been much comment on in this Council, which is set out in national planning policy. This does, in fact, use the 2014-based sub-national household projections with an uplift to reflect the affordability of housing in the local area. National planning policy states that the standard method should be used unless exceptional circumstances can justify an alternative approach, which also reflects current and future demographic trends and market signals. Planning guidance is not explicit about what constitutes exceptional circumstances, but indicates that there is scope for them to be argued where there are anomalies in the data that inform the projections. The 2014-based household projections, which were published nationally by the former Department for Communities and Local Government, are informed by the 2014-based, we use past and present trends for to predict future births, deaths and migration flows. The population projections are then converted into household projections using the household formation rate, which reflects the propensity of individuals to form households. A high level of assessment of this data indicates that there are no clear errors or anomalies in the statistics that would form exceptional circumstances and justifying deviating from the standard method. But again, this point has been much discussed and we are looking for things to challenge it on. It should be recognised that the government is explicit that the standard method should be used upon the 2014-based projections, and the council should not use more recent data sources, even if those might better reflect recent rates of migration or other demographic factors highlighted. Given the government has identified this as the starting point, it would not be an exceptional circumstance to argue that this data is no longer up to date. The NPPF, National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 11b, also permits the standard method requirement to be moved away from where there are significant constraints that would restrict the ability of the local authority to supply the number of homes. This assessment will be informed by the local plan evidence base. However, at this time, it is not considered that there should be any constraints that would justify the standard method number not being used. But I repeat for this chamber, we are investigating every possible opportunity. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Excellent, thank you, Councillor Brown. Just to remind visitors, the responses given to you by the portfolio holders will be in the minutes in full. Ms Vincent, do you have a supplementary you wish to follow up with?
I do, Madam Mayor. With regard to future needs, which the member for Sherfield talked about, from 2020 to 2038, the UK is set to experience a 10% growth in the number of households, and yet Basingstoke and Dean's emerging local plan has a projected growth rate of between 17 and 24%, which is almost twice as many. So why is this?
I think my response is I can reflect on the points that are made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have a lovely evening, Ms Vincent. Right, we move to question number 7, and it is Ms Clohessy. Good evening, Ms Clohessy. Would you like to ask your question? Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. Hello, everyone. The UN has just ruled that a clean, healthy, sustainable environment is a human right. As we all know, the climate and ecological emergency is a children's rights issue, as they are and will suffer the greatest consequences of our actions today. Could the leader and the council tell me what actions they are taking currently to protect the children of Basingstoke's health, well-being and lives through, for example, urgently improving the areas of dangerous air pollution around schools and dwellings in Basingstoke town, cleaning up our polluted rivers, making sure all children have access to healthy natural environments, not just sterile amenity green space, and wilder play areas, including the provision of forest school, and keeping your promise of declaring a climate emergency by refusing any development that will emit more fossil fuels and destroying more habitats, such as the trees at Oakdown Farm.
Thank you. I think the leader will respond to this question.
Thank you, Lucy. I appreciate your question. While I take the responsibility of this borough very seriously, it is, in my view, being handed down something from the UN doesn't help us here in Basingstoke and Dean, and I would hope that they would focus on some of the areas where children of the world are not getting the opportunities that we get within this borough. I accept that children are our future, and having been a school governor for many years, I accept that car pollution near those schools is detrimental. But one of the things that we have done in the last few months is have a air quality strategy, which was accepted in March this year, and that we understand that with the change from diesel and petrol driven cars, that we will have electric in the future. So some of that danger is disappearing. But we do need to make sure that our children and our grandchildren, in my case, walk to school, to make well-being a much bigger part of their lives, because that will improve their life chances too. To the point about our trees and our natural environment, we will be very proud of not just our conversations at MOC last night, that's the Manidown Overview Committee, which highlighted what we will be doing to improve life chances with walkways, and the and the introduction of a country park, which, although we will be losing some trees within this borough as development comes through, we can point to a situation where that country park should deliver in excess of 16,000 new trees for that area. But not just that, because we try to do even more as a borough council. And we have invested early in our ecological infrastructure. On the western corridor of that development site, we will be planting out 24,000 trees, shrubberies on that to create new diversity in our borough and create the new habitat corridors that all of our children and ourselves, as we enjoy our natural environment, can take as part of our redevelopment of this borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Ms. Clohessy, would you like to ask a supplementary?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your response. I am a science journalist and also the mother of 3 young children, a frightened mother. My children are breathing the polluted air in Norden, they're paddling in polluted rivers, but comparatively we are lucky, we have a garden. Many children in Norden suffer from the under-provision of open space and nature, encroached on with further developments. Other councils are responding rapidly to the overwhelming evidence on the danger of both environmental harm and also nature deprivation to physical and mental health by restoring urban spaces, which can boost biodiversity rapidly and make land climate resilient, and restricting motor vehicle activity outside school. In answer to your response, they are also recognising that mitigation doesn't work and you can't replace existing ancient habitats with new trees. It doesn't add up. Will the council consider these solutions and agree to act with more urgency and take the climate and ecological crisis with the gravity it deserves?
Thank you. And accept that we do accept that there is a huge pool to make sure that not just children, but all of us enjoy a natural environment that was available to many in the 50s and 60s and has not been possible with the introduction of so many cars within our borough. But I do think that it would be unfair on the generations to come if we did not have development, because our children deserve what many of us have had in this room, which is a safe, secure, warm and affordable house that they can live in with their families. So although I accept we cannot do it as the way we've been doing it in the past, we will improve development to make sure they get that same opportunity that many of us have had.
Thank you very much, Leader. Thank you very much, Ms. Clohessy, and have a lovely evening. Question number 8 is from Julian Jones. Good evening, Mr. Jones. Please, can you ask your question? It's addressed to Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Over the last 50 years, Basingstoke town has spread southwestwards by more than 2 miles, expanding well into the Test catchment area. Because Basingstoke sewage has to discharge into the Loddon Valley via the Chinham treatment works, it's necessitated the extension of the sewer net system over the southwestern ridge. The Kempshott sewer did not have capacity for the Longacre development, and Beggarwood sewage is pumped to Brighton Hill in a new sewer crossing under the Hatch-Warren sewer. This sewer has been subject to blockages. Thames Water has admitted that the junction of the Hatch-Warren and Beggarwood sewers at the Winchester Road roundabout requires a significant increase in diameter to prevent the town being flooded with raw sewage. All this is compounded by the addition of sewage from Hounsome Fields and the Basingstoke golf course, which extends the town by a further half a mile and require a network capacity for another 1,750 houses. Already the golf course site can build out by no more than 250 dwellings of its 1,000 dwellings because of the lack of sewage capacity. The local plan update sites discussed by the EPH meeting on the 2nd and 16th of September shortlisted a potential allocation of NWA L01. That's another 4,500 dwellings and would extend the urban area by a further mile. And that's before we start talking about hospitals and warehouse in this area. Whatever is built, all the effluent has to get to Chinham. None of us like to think about sewage, but the never-ending expansion of buildings to the southwest requires that you pay some attention. Will Basingstoke and Deane demand an infrastructure plan for sewage, which, with commitment dates for capacity increases before simply allocating housing numbers on a piece of paper?
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Councillor Bowen, please, if you could respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank Julian for his question. Following discussions with Thames Water earlier in the year, it is understood that the infrastructure issues to the southwest of Basingstoke were operational, i.e. they tell me it was blockages rather than hydraulic work, and work has been done to resolve this, with them unaware of any issues since November 2020. Thames Water are aware of the potential future developments to the southwest of Basingstoke, and relevant discussions have taken place. Consultants are carrying out a water cycle study for the borough and have been liaising with Thames Water throughout the process alongside Basingstoke and Deane officers. The draft water cycle study indicates that Basingstoke wastewater treatment works has a sufficient capacity to treat the additional wastewater flows from proposed growth in the borough. Liaison will continue with Thames Water through the finalising of the water cycle study and the progression of the local plan update. Thames Water have indicated that they will invest in infrastructure when development is certain to go ahead, which in practice means at the time of planning consent. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, I'd just like to say you're lucky you've seen the water cycle study because nobody else has. Anyways, thank you, Mr. Jones. Councillor Bound. Mr. Jones, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I think I do. Yes, certainly. We know that in the cases of development up to now, Thames Water have had plans, but they haven't always delivered on those plans. So it's how will Basingstoke ensure that they do deliver and not fail to have a 5-year housing land supply, which could lead to unexpected sites like the island site in the Beggarwood Park, being scheduled into an area where there was already constraint on the sewage system.
I think as Julian will know, EPH talked long and hard about, and I think we agreed, and I think we'll discuss it again with the motions that we see in front of us tonight, Madam Mayor, that we would make our plan infrastructure-led. And I'm working with Office to work through the detail of that to ensure that that delivery happens.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I do think a point needs to be put in the records that you're making references to a document that no one's seen and has been refused, and so that anybody who witnesses this meeting doesn't think that this is information that is offered and is available to everybody in this room. Thank you. I'm talking about the water cycle study. Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Have a good evening. Question number 9. Can we have Mrs. Tuck? Ms. Tuck, even, please can you come and ask your questions?
Good evening. According to the World Wildlife Fund, the UK is one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world. More than 1 in 7 native species face extinction, and more than 40% are in decline. Biodiversity is essential for human life and a flourishing countryside. The messages from the 2019 IPBES Global Assessment Report are stark. Without significant changes, 1 million species will be eradicated from the planet. The loss of species and habitats poses as much danger to life on Earth as climate change does. Biodiversity and climate are inseparable, and combined present the greatest threat our countryside has ever faced. Restoring nature is our primary defence against climate breakdown, and climate breakdown will continue to accelerate the decline of nature. We therefore welcome Motion 16 being tabled today. Therefore, with the local plan update, Will all members ensure that these messages frame and strengthen our policies and ensure that the priorities of A, biodiversity, B, protection and restoration of our natural habitats flow through the local planning activity at every stage, from infrastructure and housing numbers through to location, design and build? Please confirm you are strengthening our biodiversity policies in this way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Tuck. Councillor Fell, would you like to respond, please?
Madam Mayor, thank you. Can I thank Mrs Tuck for her question? She raises the topic of the moment, which is where is biodiversity in our priorities as a council? Is it near the top or near the bottom? I suspect if we roll back time a few years, it would have been by general consent near the bottom. Given a straight binary choice, do we build in this field, destroy a habitat and build homes for 50 people on the housing waiting list? It would be a no-brainer. And I suspect if someone came along with an application for a large business or factory that created 50 jobs for the next 20 years and destroyed an ancient habitat, again a no-brainer, it would just be granted. In more recent years, the policies have tried to set out how we mitigate harm to biodiversity. But I happen to agree with Lucy Clohessy that I don't think that they can be shown on larger sites and older habitats to work. How can it be right that recreating something is better than actually keeping the original? So as we move forwards and we reach this important choice tonight, I think it's important that we recognise that the natural environment cannot always be the loser in a development application. There has to be a scale within our policies, and we are fighting to put this into the policies as they're being developed, which says that at one extreme, the harm is so great, the answer has to be no. And then there's a sliding scale where we could see at the other end there's virtually no harm, and of course the answer is definitely yes. And everything else can be compromised in between. Can there be mitigation? Or is there a balance that says the harm is too great and there shouldn't be? So we are fighting hard to create policies that protect biodiversity within our borough. They have been road tested as a map. They will be road tested again with other councillors and in a wider environment in due course.
Thank you very much, Councillor Raffel. Ms Tuck, would you like to ask a supplementary in response to his response?
Thank you, Councillor Raffel, and I'm pleased I can rely on you to champion the corner. Would you just confirm that you're aware that several other councils have declared an ecological emergency and strengthened their policies? So this is not without precedent. Thank you.
Can I thank Mrs Tuck for her supplementary question and say, yes, I've been assisted, of course, by the wording of the motion and done a little bit of research into that. I am aware. It'll be up to members, Madam Mayor, won't it be, to decide on how they want to pursue that motion. But should it be granted, then the Council will have to take action accordingly.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fell, and thank you. Have a nice evening, Ms Tuck. Question number 10. Was submitted by Francesca Maritan, who I understand is unable to attend due to quarantine requirements. So I have agreed to read out her question on her behalf. And it is addressed to Councillor Raffel again. All councils will soon be obliged to produce a local nature recovery strategy to meet biodiversity targets. Lessons learnt from pilot schemes include strong leadership and transparency from the responsible authority was crucial in getting others involved from the outset. Early engagement of a wide range of people and organisations is crucial to secure genuine engagement. Effective collaboration takes time. Does the council member agree that the development of the local plan would benefit from the quality input of environmental experts in order to make the best informed decisions which do not run counter to the local nature recovery strategy, and further, that any plans for the future development of Basingstoke should be conducted in an open and transparent manner and tackled as a whole to deliver the conflicting priorities of the urbanisation of and recovery of our local nature?
Madam Mayor, can I thank Ms Maritain for her question. I'm looking forward to working through the effect of the Environment Act when it comes into force, which I understand is going to be soon, and for its effect to be fully embedded in the policies of our emerging local plan. Indeed, I don't think I'm disclosing anything top secret. We had that conversation with the portfolio holder and the planning policy team this morning about how we are going to make sure that the local plan is fit to work with the Environment Act as it comes into force. It's slightly difficult to say what that will mean at the moment, but it will become very clear very suddenly in the next few weeks, I'm sure. The emerging local plan, I can assure Ms Maritain, does have the input of the natural environment team and their expertise, and we are looking at new bold policies that do more to recognise the vulnerable natural environment and seek ways of protecting it, enhancing it, whilst of course allowing development in appropriate locations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fell. And I think this is the final public question. And if Ms Bedford could come up to the microphone, please. Good evening, Ms Bedford. Would you please like to ask your question?
Good evening. At the council meeting held on a Thursday, the 25th of February 2021, the Cabinet Member for Planning, Infrastructure and Natural Environment committed to the fact that we should certainly look at the Merton Rule and it should shape our discussions as whether it is appropriate or other similar rules are the Basingstoke Rule. We have designed policies in the past that have worked for us and have been approved by planning inspectors that perhaps other local planning authorities don't have. And I see no reason why we should not be bold and do that for the future. Would the member agree that now is the time to form a Basingstoke Rule to ensure that any further development of Basingstoke must be conducted to the highest standard practicable, incorporating sustainable design and build as an absolute minimum?
Thank you, Ms Bedford. And I think it's Councillor Fell who will respond to that.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Can I thank Mrs Bedford for the question? And can I just say what the Merton Rule is for those who are not quite sure? It was the first time a prescriptive policy had been written into an adopted local planning document. It was a groundbreaking planning policy developed by Merton Council in London, which required new developments to generate at least 10% of their energy needs from an on-site renewable energy equipment in order to help reduce annual carbon dioxide emissions in the built environment. The rule applied to all types of buildings, not just homes. I think it had to be over a certain number of homes and certain types of commercial buildings. They developed the rule and adopted it in 2003, and since then it's become more widespread use. There's more I could tell you, but I'm not going to. So what I want to say about the policies on climate change, we have road tested them now with the Low Carbon Energy Forum. That's myself and Councillor Bound. We did that in the last few days, and they were very warmly received. I'm not talking about globally warmly received, but they were very warmly received as to what we were trying to achieve, and we took a lot away from it. It was a real engagement. I think everyone said it's the best meeting of that forum ever. We're then going to take them to the Basingstoke Transition Network, and then we're going to bring it back to the members' map, so that we've been to all the outside experts, and then of course we come to our internal experts here and we can tell you what we've gained from everyone else we've talked to about are we setting our standards higher. So come back to the question about a Basingstoke Rule. I don't know what the answer is until we've got all of that done, because it could be that we do end up doing something that is unique, and in which case we could call it a Basingstoke Rule. It could be that we're doing a range of things that aren't necessarily unique, but they're up there with what we want to achieve, and therefore we wouldn't necessarily want to call it a rule. I can't answer that until we get there.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fell. Ms Bedford, would you like to ask a supplementary?
No further question, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much and have a lovely evening. As I said, thank you to all those public that engaged. That concludes the public questions for tonight, and once again, many thanks. We hope you felt that this was a worthwhile engagement in democracy. Right, as all of you know, theoretically, well, not theoretically, but at 9:30 we will have to determine whether we're going to suspend standing orders or not, and we can either decide at that juncture whether we want to proceed with an additional new council meeting or not. And I just want you all to bear that in mind as we progress through this agenda, that there are 2 dates that have been identified, that there are not meetings taking place in this council that will be proposed by me in that event, that we cannot finish all our business tonight. Right, so the petitions. We have a petition presented by Christine Northam entitled Stop the Destruction of 67 Oak and 3 Beech Trees on Oakdown Farm Warehouse Site. Christine, would you like to come forward, or would you just like to say a few words? Have you already submitted it?
I have submitted it, and I have got a few words I'd like to say, please.
Brilliant. I'd love to hear them. Thank you very much.
Okay. It's not just me standing here this evening. I'm here on behalf of 102,000 people who agree passionately that the Oakdown oak trees should not be destroyed. 4,000 of the petitioners come from the borough of Basingstoke. These 4,000 people are not just petitioners, they are voters. They all feel strongly that these mature oak trees should not be chopped down. The 70 trees, they're majestic oak trees, are up to 130 years old. They were planted long before the M3 was built, and all of us were born. They line the lane leading from south from the A30. Visually, they enhance the landscape at the northern end of the Hampshire Downs and the important southern gateway into Basingstoke. Your own tree officer has said that the existing trees make a positive contribution towards the character and appearance of the locality. The oaks relate to sections of ancient woodland which can still be seen in the landscape of the area. Many people truly love the environment in this part of the borough. They all draw physical and mental health benefits from being able to see, know, and experience the area. Oak trees are estimated to be the home of 2,300 species of wildlife, including 320 found only in oaks. They act as lungs to counteract the CO2 pollution from existing traffic on the M3, the A30, and all the new housing in the area. The nearby hedgerows, shrubs, and grasses also provide important ecosystem benefits. The removal of the trees and the annihilation of the area around them would be another step towards ecological disaster. But it's not just about the area being a beautiful and valued place for people to enjoy. It's been identified as a priority habitat by Hampshire County Council's Biodiversity Information Centre. A recent study showed that the UK has an average of about half its biodiversity left, far below the global average of 75%. Councillors, how do you know that the rules and recommendations about priority habitat relating to this site have been implemented? What is the point of international leaders gathering next month in Glasgow to draw up an agreement to save the planet when local councils don't take action on their own? November's COP26 meeting, the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Initiative, Plant a Tree for the Jubilee, and a recent storyline in Coronation Street about climate change all highlight the fears so many have about the future for their children and grandchildren and the need for urgent action. So how could the destruction of 70 trees fit into that narrative? You, who we voted for, are there to look after our best interests, not only for now, but also for the future. If these precious trees are lost, you will be betraying the trust of 4,000 local people, your constituents. And you will be showing the 102,000 people on the petition that you just don't care. Ask yourselves, How does the plan to destroy the Oakdown Oaks fit in with Basingstoke Council's declaration of a climate emergency in 2019 and a commitment to carbon neutrality by 2030? You have it within your power now to show your own green credentials, to honour those climate change objectives and be seen as a leading example to other local authorities. I urge you, please, to listen to the voices of 102,000 people and save the Oakdown Oaks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Northam. Okay, your petition will now go to the Planning Department, as it is a petition relating to a planning application, but you made your point very eloquently and we hear you loud and clear. Thank you for coming and thank you for your group. Right, number 7 on the agenda is resignations and appointments. Pages 27 to 28 members. I understand there's one resignation from a committee and a reappointment. Leader, do you want to make an announcement on that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's the confirmation that Councillor Paul Miller will be replaced by Councillor Konechka on the Audit and Accounts Committee. Thank you.
No. Okay, thank you. And then, is there anybody else that's, no changes. And then to receive resignations from outside bodies, to make any reappointments or fill any existing vacancies. Is there anybody want to get involved in that? No, remain unchanged. Okay. Right, we move to special urgency provision number 8. No update as set out in the agenda. Members, this is on pages 29 to 32. It is in connection with the decision regarding MALS, replacement and refurbishment made under special urgency provision. We are required to note the report. I would like to invite the leader, who I understand wishes to propose this, and I also need to know whether there's a seconder. Leader, do you wish to propose this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As outlined on the agenda, item 8, I hope somebody will second it.
Councillor James says he's happy to second it. Does anybody wish to speak to this, or are we all agreed? Excellent, thank you, we're all agreed. Right, number 9, appointment of an independent person and independent standards assessor. This is a report from the Head of Law and Governance. This is on pages 33 to 37. It is in connection with the Standards Committee and 2 new appointments, and it is as per the agenda item. We are required on page 33 of the document as council to agree to appoint Alan Harrison as an independent person for the purposes of Section 28 Localism Act 2011 for the period of 2 years from the 1st of November 2021 with 1 2-year extension if required. 2, to agree the appointment of Amanda Orchard as an independent standard assessor for the period of 2 years from 1st of November 2021 and agree Amanda Orchard also be appointed as an advisory non-voting member of the Standards Committee for the duration of her tenure as an independent standards assessor. I shall propose this and
seconded.
And the Deputy has seconded it. Does anybody wish to speak to this? Agreed, we're all agreed. Excellent. Number 10 is appointment of proper officer for health protections function. This is a report of the monitoring officer. There's no update, is as set out on the agenda on pages 39 to 42. It's ostensibly to do with the closure of Public Health England and our requirement to appoint a person employed as a consultant in communicable disease control and as a consultant in health protection at the South East region of the UK Health Security Agency. I shall propose this. Deputy Mayor will second it. Are you all agreed? Brilliant, thank you. So that's all agreed. And the agenda item, dispensation consideration, has been withdrawn. So that is no longer an agenda item. Right, so we move to the 8 motions, which is, as I know you all know, is exceptional number of motions. And as I've alluded to, I will seek to suspend standing orders, and there are a couple of dates that are in the diary that I will be proposing as a follow-on if we go on too long. I would like to remind all members that it is unlawful to be whipped on strategic specific planning matters, and that when you vote on any of these motions that relate to planning matters, you do so in your name and yours alone. So that is my first comment, and I'm not going to take it in the order of the agenda. So I would like to call for the first motion to be motion number 13 regarding the white ribbon. I would like to remind those number 13, we're not taking it in the order as per the agenda item, sorry. I'm using my discretion to choose when the motions come up. So we, just for the benefit of new-ish councillors, 6 months in councillors, is 5 minutes for the proposer, 5 minutes for the seconder, but these are maximums. Then we have 20 minutes debate with 5 minutes maximum per speaker, and then we have 5 minutes for the sum up. Councillor Howard Sorrell is going to propose this. This will be his maiden speech, and he has 5 minutes to speak to this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, I'm afraid you have to stand.
Oh, that's fine.
I'm afraid it's a rule of the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, councillors. My seconder will be highlighting specific actions we hope this council will take should this motion pass. So I'd like to talk to you about why this motion is important. It's a shame that this is the topic of my maiden speech and of my first motion to this council. I shouldn't be having to speak on this topic because this topic is a problem that shouldn't exist. We all know that violence against women is a problem, and I'm confident that I don't need to convince any of you that voting in favour of passing this motion is the right thing to do. This motion isn't about politics or point scoring. It's simply about us deciding this evening to commit to doing better for the girls and women in our lives and across our borough. According to a recent BBC article, in the past decade, 2,075 women were killed in England and Wales, and over 90% of the people that did that killing were men. Out of those 2,075 women, roughly 57% of them were killed by someone they knew, most commonly a partner or an ex-partner. Roughly 70% of those women were killed in their own homes. This year, we've all seen several headlines which have tragically highlighted the issue of male violence against women. I'd like to say that there has never been a more appropriate time for this council to make the White Ribbon Pledge, but this movement has been around for over a decade. Therefore, since we can't change the past, we can at least be better than our predecessors. And I say that knowing full well that a lot of you have sat on this council for over a decade. We all know that this motion is the right thing to do, but if anybody here needs further convincing, then I draw your attention to the following. This commitment has been made by dozens of councils across the country. I will now list a few of them. Blackpool Council is controlled by the Labour Party. Ashfield District Council is controlled by Independents. Eastbourne Borough Council is controlled by Liberal Democrats. Brighton and Hove Council is controlled by the Green Party. And Lancashire County Council is controlled by the Conservative Party. Those are just a few. There are dozens across the country. So regardless of our politics, we all have colleagues across the country who have already voted in favour of making the White Ribbon Pledge. We have the opportunity tonight to join them, and I hope that we will be good enough to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, the seconder is Councillor Woolridge. Would you like to reserve your right to speak later? Okay.
No, I'll
brilliant.
speak.
Oh, you want to speak now? Okay, sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's an honour to second this motion tonight on such an important and pressing issue. It's also been a pleasure to link in with the Women's Equality Basingstoke to prepare for this motion. Their collaborative, outcome-driven and non-political approach is so refreshing and absolutely what we need to get this motion passed tonight and then to move forward with the White Ribbon campaign to gain accreditation. Councillor Howard Sorrell has touched on the timing of this motion. Incidents of violence against women and girls are increasing both nationally and locally. Far too many women and girls simply don't feel safe either in their own homes or outside in their communities when they're getting on with their lives. Many women don't know who they can turn to for support with domestic abuse or have the opportunity to get this support. A few facts for Basingstoke. Over the last 2 years, there have been on average 328 violent incidents a week. Over 3,000 incidents of domestic abuse were reported to the police in the year ending March 2019. And 739 victims in the borough were referred to the Domestic Abuse Support Service, STOP DA, between April 2019 and March 2020, increasing by 20% to 926 referrals between April 2020 and March 2021. I am all too aware of how prevalent domestic abuse is, also the different forms it takes. These range from physical and sexual abuse, emotional and psychological abuse, economic and financial abuse, to controlling behaviour and coercive control. I say this from the position of witnessing it through my work in frontline housing roles for more than 20 years. Domestic abuse can happen anywhere, regardless of age, ethnicity, sexuality, location or wealth. It has profound long-term damaging effects on victims and their children, including anxiety, depression and low self-esteem. I'd like to note, however, that perpetrators are not just men, but the majority of them are, and not all victims are women. As a council, we need to take a leading role in helping women in our borough to feel safe. There is so much more we could and should be doing, both strategically and operationally. Other accredited white ribbon councils are doing much better than we are currently at domestic abuse awareness and promoting support services. With example initiatives are Cambridge City Council, who have set up a participating space-safe pharmacies initiative where domestic abuse victims can ask for support by giving a password which alerts pharmacy staff that they need help. Hastings Borough Council, who have designed their own domestic abuse website pages to include an exit button so victims can quickly leave the page if perpetrators come near them. Leeds City Council, who have compiled a YouTube video presented by male councillors supporting the White Ribbon campaign and raising awareness about domestic abuse. These are just 3 examples. So we're asking you all to take the first step tonight by supporting this motion and agreeing to take the White Ribbon pledge. Also, for males from all sides of the chamber to think about putting themselves forward to be part of a working party led by male Basingstoke and Dean councillors. This will hopefully be to work alongside the Women's Equality Basingstoke and Stop Domestic Abuse to draw up an action plan to gain White Ribbon accreditation as soon as possible. And, most importantly, support the women in our borough to feel safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Woolridge. Right, I've got 2 speakers at the moment. Councillor Harvey. Okay. If Councillor Harvey, would you like to speak first, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I stand in support of the motion and say that violence against women, whether it occurs directly within or outside of an organisation, or in the home, or in any place, is a serious, prevalent and preventable issue. We should sign up as a council and commit to the actions that are required of us. And I, as a councillor, male councillor in this chamber, will make that pledge this evening in my speech. I will make that pledge and do what I can to forward this particular agenda. Since Sarah Everard's tragic death in March of this year at the hands of a male police officer, the issue of male violence against women has made the headlines. But Sabina Nessa's murder in Kidbrooke, harrowing and tragic as it is an issue is deep-seated. This issue is more than it is deep-seated, it is endemic, and male violence against women must be addressed. Unfortunately, the so-called solutions from the government and the Met Police at the moment are not good enough. Women are being told to flag down a bus if they are concerned for their safety. They have been told to carry alarms and not walk alone at night. Boris Johnson is refusing to make misogyny a hate crime because it's too big a task to take on. Well, what about tackling this issue with men as a preventative measure, rather than shifting the responsibility of managing the issue onto women? We should accept the responsibility as men. A complete overhaul of the conversation around male violence is needed. Not only would the White Ribbon accreditation assure that the education of men and boys around violence against women and girls, but it could also lead to huge steps in rebuilding the justice system. Plus, the police need to be educated on this issue. I am very aware that it is not just the responsibility of the Council, and collaboration from our Police Crime Commissioner is vital if we are to ensure responsibility is shared in tackling male violence in Basingstoke. A resident living in Norden told me that she wants to feel safe when she's walking alone, but as the winter evenings draw in, she can't say that right now, and she'd ever feel comfortable doing this in the current circumstance. Even during the day and in public spaces, she tells me she has experienced harassment from men, and she's had to make changes to her route home to avoid danger. Some men do not feel the need to hide their harassment. It has become a part of daily life. She doesn't feel free. This cannot carry on. This has got to change. Change needs to be made. Let's pass this motion. Let's show leadership and let's take action together.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harvey. Right, on my list I've got Councillor Carruthers next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Earlier this week, I attended a parish council meeting. As I tried to do where possible, I left my car at home and walked to the meeting. As the meeting ended, I left the building. Of course, as the days are drawing in, it was dark. I went through a routine. I messaged home to tell them that I was leaving, told them what time I would be home. I walked a long way home to ensure that I was avoiding the less populated and darker routes. As a woman, since my teens, I've been subconsciously carrying out small acts like this without ever really questioning it and just accepting that this is part of being a woman. However, this isn't really about women, is it? It's about men. It's about men who commit violence and abuse against women, and it's about the wider cultural attitudes that tolerate and condone such behaviour. For too long, women have accepted the need to protect themselves. In 2020, the Office of National Statistics estimated that 4.9 million women have been victims of sexual assault in their lives. A survey carried out by Amnesty showed that a third of people believe that women who flirt are partially responsible for sexual assault. There are many shocking statistics out there, and I could reel them out all evening. White Ribbon is a charity that is confronting this problem head-on, and they are doing it in the right way, by being about positive male role models, influencing and educating other boys and men to take responsibility, to not commit, excuse or remain silent against male violence against women. I urge my fellow councillors to support this motion. We must accept that violence and abuse against women is right here and right now, and we have an individual responsibility to play a role in being part of the solution. I support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Carruthers. Right, I have Councillor Bound next on the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to take a few moments to describe a family. A family where the victim of domestic abuse has spent decades suffering. Indeed, suffered trauma for so long that in the last decade has significantly impacted her mental health. A family where the perpetrator hasn't understood the impact of their actions on every member of their family. A family who live in a house with the imprint of hammers in a door to act as a constant reminder of the abuse that has occurred in the past, and perhaps a threat of what abuse might happen in the future. A house that is often cold because that abuse has meant windows in the house have been broken. A very public sign that neighbours have found difficult to navigate their way through. A family where the children cower in their rooms whilst the abuse happens, with the hope that their room and their bed will remain feeling like the safe place. Heads down, lights off. A family where a fateful day will come for every single child when they have built up enough courage to intervene. Maybe it wasn't courage. Maybe just a day when they were so concerned about what would happen next that they would be driven to leave the safety of their bedroom, and step in to stop whatever they thought would happen next. A day that all of those children would remember decades later with complete and utter clarity. The family I described to you today is my family. Because of this, I took the White Ribbon Pledge several years ago. I asked every councillor to support this motion and to make the promise. The promise to never commit, excuse, or remain silent of violence against women. I also ask those not in this chamber to make the pledge too, if they can. The pledge can be made by anybody over the age of 14. As a 14-year-old boy, I would have found it very difficult to make that promise. So for all those people who it would not be easy to make this pledge, it is important that we do so tonight. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bound. Councillor, sorry, I just think Sorrell, I forget the Howard, I'm really sorry. Councillor Howard Sorrell, would you like to sum up? And then we'll take a vote, sorry. You don't have to if you don't want to.
No, I would like to.
Okay.
There was just a bit of discussion going on.
Okay, sorry.
In summary, I would mainly just like to thank all of the councillors who've spoken in support of the motion. Councillor Carruthers, that's a personal experience that you've shared. Simon Bound, you've also shared a personal experience. And those are the experiences that people need to hear, because not everybody has those, so not everybody can relate and understand why this is important. Councillor Harvey, you spoke in support and you pledged within your speech that you would take the White Ribbon Pledge, and that also is important. We need, as somebody said in their speech, to lead by example. I'd also like to thank Priya for coming along this evening and giving a speech earlier on this same topic, and there are other members of the Women's Equality Party who, before this meeting, were protesting outside to encourage us all to vote in favour of this motion, and I would like to thank them for coming along and showing all of the members here tonight that it is an important issue that we need to support. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howard Sorrell. Thank you. Right, we now move to the vote. Would everyone like to say that they agreed, or do you want to agreed? I think it's unanimous. Excellent, thank you. We can move on to the next motion. Right, as I said, we're not going to follow the order, so I'm now taking you to number 19, if possible. It is a motion proposed by Councillor Taylor and seconded by Councillor Watts. The same numbers apply, 5 minutes, 20 and 5. Councillor Taylor, would you like to propose a motion? Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. What a nice surprise. Sorry, everyone else. Hopefully this will be fairly quick, because this is an extremely straightforward motion, as you see, and I will be quite brief, therefore, and hope you will be as well. Everyone will be aware from the demonstration stage before the EPH meeting on the 2nd of September, at which the revised local plan was to be openly discussed for the first time, that there is great disquiet amongst the borough's residents over the prospect of having to shoulder again a truly vast number of new homes in the coming plan period. Basingstoke has played an enormous part in delivering housing to this country, from the 50s and 60s when London overspill arrived on the doorstep of this town, to latter years in which we've delivered an average of 857 new dwellings every year. We have seen discrete village communities systematically swallowed up by the inexorable pushing out of the town's borders. And we have seen estates springing up in fields and sites throughout the wider town area without any real overall town planning. The more we bow to the ever-present top-down demand for eye-watering numbers of new homes, the more we find ourselves throwing up houses that do nothing to help us achieve the carbon neutrality that our world so desperately needs and that we as a council have pledged to. And the more we make even worse our country's appalling biodiversity performance, which we've heard about this evening. So this motion has nothing to do with ward or where housing should go. It is simply an expression of determination that we will not continue to roll over to government demands for another vast new homes figures. It's time to assess our borough, time to take seriously its future with regard to environment, landscape, biodiversity, climate emergency, roads infrastructure, water supply and sewage. The wise decision of EPH to reject the proposed figure of 17,820 units over the next planned period, that's an increase on previous numbers, was very welcome. This motion simply requests that the rejection comes from the whole council in order to send out the strongest possible message that in the current climate, in which new housing doesn't have to be in the shadow of London, as regional development increases and more people are working from home, Basingstoke should have a considerably lower target in the coming years. So the motion that I'm asking for you to pass is that this council rejects 17,820 units as the housing figure in the local plan review. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Now, the seconder is Councillor Watts. Do you wish to second this and speak now, or do you wish to reserve the right to speak later?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to speak now. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to second this motion. Our borough isn't coping at the moment. As you all know, our infrastructure is creeping at the seams. It's extremely difficult to get GP appointments. It's near impossible to get a dentist, NHS dentist appointment, which I found out in the last couple of weeks when my crowns fell out. So as we know, we're not coping at the moment. The current development we have in Beggarwood at the moment at Kennel Farm, the children there have got no primary schools. They're full up. They're going to a school in South Ham. So it's not working at the moment. So these top-down figures on Basingstoke and Dean, it's just not on. No more localism. I mean, it's payback time for the Tory government, paying back to their paymasters, to the developers. And we, in Basingstoke and Dean, are the ones that are going to get the brunt of it. These 18,000 houses, are they going to address the affordability need that we have in Basingstoke and Dean? No, I don't think they are. They're not going to address the crisis we have in rents. I mean, we're talking rents at the moment for ex-council houses of £1,200, £1,300. No, they're not. They're going to be never £700,000 homes up in Beggarwood, not for the residents of Basingstoke and Dean, but for people to come commute in to Basingstoke and commute back out again. And we're not going to address the housing problem we actually have. We actually need a housing assessment for our own local needs, which addresses the housing crisis we have. And nationally, we actually need a change in housing policy. We need to move away. We need to move back to the post-war housing policies which we had, which changed in the 1980s, where we built council houses and housing association for housing, which my parents moved to in the 1970s in Basingstoke, and they bought the house. So I'm not against the right to buy, but I think it's right that councils should replenish those stocks. So I think we need a sea change in housing policies, and government should look to trust local councils as well. I mean, we can build green council houses, we can put solar panels on our roofs, biomassing, ground source heating, we can do all that. The local government should not be afraid of local councils. So this council should take a strong stance against this government and say it's time to stop and pause and give us a reasonable housing figure which addresses our local needs. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Do we have any speakers? Right, first.
Councillor Frost.
Councillor Frost, yeah. Please, would you like to stand? I have no others. Right, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This motion has my full support, which was shown by unanimous support of a motion at EPH on the 16th of September this year. With a rejection, a complete rejection, I should add, of the 17,820 housing figure, okay, that was proposed or put forward in the plan. The number of 17,820 dwellings over the next plan period is simply too much for the borough to bear, and I look forward, okay, to receiving updates on Councillor Bound's efforts, supported by our leader, to ensure that we get the right lower number for the borough, whatever that number will be. I urge all members to support this motion and support Councillor Bound and Councillor Rattigan in their negotiations with the national government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Frost, Councillor Harvey, and I haven't seen any other hands.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thames Water have stated, as we've heard already this evening, that Basingstoke is one of the few locations in their area where they would not recommend any more building due to the fragile state of the local water infrastructure. Our area is a special challenge for them. They're currently exceeding their very tight requirements and are working on improvements to minimise the overspill in local water courses. But we all know that they have overspilled sewage into those local water courses already, yet alone the 17,820 homes that would come to place even more pressure. There is still a lot to do, they say, but they are not getting the funding that they need to do the job properly, and they also note that climate change will only make their job harder. Have we truly listened to that advice and acted on it, or are we justifying development, moulding the evidence to suit the growth agenda? Hampshire and the Alderwife Trust have told us that they highlighted the need for good policies to be established to underpin local decisions, because so many of the issues we have influence over and impact over are much wider than simply Basingstoke town, but rather our whole borough and region. Are we listening to that advice? And do we truly understand the impact of 18,000 more houses in our borough? CPRE point out that the current building targets are based on 2014 census data, and that using 2018 data, as we again have already heard this evening, within the government algorithm, would significantly reduce the target in Basingstoke and Deane. And the target was discussed around being potentially on the 2018 figures of being 342 homes, rather than the 2014 figure that would be nearer 900. When we say we reject 17,820, I don't mean that we suddenly then accept 17,800, or that we accept 17,000. We have to accept a meaningful change in the number to reflect the true local housing need we have, rather than some imposition from somebody else or playing games with the figures. Briefings from special advisors close to Michael Gove indicate that changes to the planning reforms will be significant. If we allow our local plan update to proceed with 17,820 units, then we risk doing so much damage to our local environment that it will be irrevocable. We know we need houses for local people to meet the demands our communities face, but meeting that demand does not involve the growth levels the LEP and unfortunately the last leader of this council endorsed. It means this council needs to lead the debate on climate change and shape the housing market to meet the challenge so that we do achieve zero carbon housing, so that we do meet the challenge of infrastructure first. Children now may well want a home in the future. They also want their environment to be intact in the future, and they care about the green issues. That is why they are protesting in the way they are at the COP26, that it be as meaningful as they can make it, and we should listen to them when they say they are not willing to put their future at risk and the cost of the environment, nor should we in our decisions in their name. It really is a tough debate. Do we build 18,000 houses and destroy some of the most environmentally sensitive land in our borough? Or do we draw a line and say we need to do better, led by better evidence? I've never been a NIMBY in my life. You know me in this chamber. I've never ever been a NIMBY in my life, but I find myself in a position in this debate because it's not just my life I'm responsible for. I want to look young people of our borough in the eye and say, I did everything I could to save your future. And I'm sure you agree with that. I listen to the threat, the warnings on climate change, and we need to take them seriously. If we act quickly and decisively in our local plan, and we don't hide behind other people's failings and their rules, and we chose to lead, I believe we can genuinely step up to this challenge. I oppose the 18,000 units, and I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. If there are no other speakers, Councillor Taylor, would you like to sum up? Or
Very quickly, I haven't really got anything further to say except let's have one voice here to protect our borough from further overdevelopment and protect the communities within our borough from being expanded out of existence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we need to take a vote or are we all agreed?
Agreed.
Excellent. Right, so I have decided for number 3, we're going to go to number 16. I thought it would give a little add of frisson of excitement as to, since nobody knows which is being selected. I haven't declared it with anybody. So there you go. So the next one is the Ecological Emergency. I mean, joking apart, these are very serious matters, and I don't want to belittle the matters. But it's also good to keep all of you members on your toes. So, Councillor Konecki is to propose this, and Councillor Harvey is to second it. And you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the 30 seconds of warning. I'm hoping that this motion is, I'm hoping that this motion is going to be an easy sell to all of you. However, I think it's worth me saying a few words just to really emphasise the importance of what we're asking you to support tonight. The challenges and risks posed by climate change are now widely known. Certainly within the UK, I think it's generally recognised that we all have a role to play in terms of reducing our carbon emissions. And I think most of us also have a pretty good idea about how we go about doing that, whether that's through using our cars less, turning down the heating in our housing, or better insulating our homes. And of course, local authorities and central government have a role to play in terms of helping us make the right choices, because they're not always that easy to do. We've not solved global warming. I don't think anyone would claim that we have, but there are reasons to be optimistic about the future. We're now starting to fight back through initiatives that we take individually and collectively. We've already heard tonight about the climate emergency that we declared a couple of years ago. We've also heard about the COP26 summit in Glasgow next month. However, climate change isn't the only man-made phenomenon that threatens us at the moment. We also face an ecological crisis. And a few facts will highlight what's at stake. A recent study by the National Biodiversity Network concluded that 15% of UK species are threatened with extinction. An assessment by the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services found that extinction rates are currently 10 to hundreds of times higher than historical averages. And the WWF, the World Wide Fund for Nature, reported a 68% decline in monitored populations of mammals, birds, amphibians, reptiles and fish between 1970 and 2016. So Mother Nature, unfortunately, is very much on the ropes. But why does this matter? Why should we care? Well, it matters because our society, our economy, and our ecological environment are all inextricably linked. We rely on the natural environment for so much: food, clean water, fresh air, medicine, and even our mental well-being, as many of us have discovered over the past 18 months or so. And also personally as well. I grew up in rural Leicestershire, surrounded by nature, but I took it all for granted. And it was only when I moved to London for my first job that I realised not everywhere had access to wonderful green fields, woods and forests, and bountiful green spaces. And it was only then that I really recognised the value of that nature. It's only when it was taken away that I realised how valuable it actually was. And I think there's a lesson there. So if our natural world is left to decay, the consequences for us are potentially disastrous, even as severe as some of the threats posed by climate change. And yet, unlike global warming, the ecological crisis is perhaps not as high up on our agendas as it should be. Yes, we might occasionally read stories about the importance of bees in our ecosystem, and that's great, but do we all accept that we have a responsibility to protect biodiversity? And even if we do we know what we can do to try and improve matters? It's clear that we need to do more, both as individuals and as a council, and we need to do that now. We can't wait any longer because we're already playing catch-up. And that's what this motion is all about. It challenges us to do just that, which I hope is why you'll agree it's time to declare an ecological emergency to go alongside our climate emergency. Before I conclude, Madam Mayor, just one final point. I'd like to acknowledge the work of the Basingstoke Transition Network in helping us to bring this motion forward this evening. They did a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of developing this motion, and they shared that with all of the political groups on the council. And I'm very pleased to have worked with my colleagues, my Lib Dem colleagues, the Independents, the Labour group to take this work forward. And also I appreciate the expressions of support that I've had from a number of members of the Conservative benches. I hope that we can all agree that we need to do more. And we've already had some ideas from Solve and from the Basingstoke Transition Network this evening as to how we can improve and how we can make matters better. So I encourage all councillors to join together in declaring this ecological emergency this evening. We've started to tackle climate change. Let's now follow suit and put the same amount of effort and the same amount of urgency in making sure that we start to better protect our biodiversity and our ecology. And let's start to improve matters now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Konecki. Right, the seconder is Councillor Harvey. Do you wish to speak now? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We'll keep the trend going. Right now, we are facing a man-made disaster of global scale, our greatest threat in 1,000 years, climate change. If we don't take action, the collapse of our civilizations and the extinction of much of the natural world is on the horizon. Sir David Attenborough at the UN Climate Change Summit in Poland in 2018. Unless change is achieved in only a very few years' time, the damage will be irreversible. Our short-termism is condemning future generations, and we must understand that the issue runs to the heart of how we would organise our borough over the years to come. The moment of crisis has indeed come, and we can no longer prevaricate. A document published by the London Economic in January 2020 said that the iconic doomsday clock, symbolising the gravest perils facing mankind, is now closer to midnight than at any point since its creation in 1947. The clock, which serves as a metaphor for global apocalypse, was moved forward by 20 seconds. Our species' future rests on how seriously we really are about changing our society, our economy and our lives to tackle climate change. It's therefore critical that environmental sustainability becomes a tenet of everything we do. 15% of British wildlife is now at risk of extinction. The Natural History Museum says we are one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world, as we have heard this evening already. We have 53% of our biodiversity left when the global average is 75%. It's not just our ecology, it's not just our climate, it's our ecology too. We need ways to stop wildlife habitats from being destroyed, managing land in a sustainable way that is sympathetic to wildlife, and creating and caring for wildlife-rich spaces in every part of our borough. We need to rewild our borough. I hope that by declaring an ecological emergency, we'll kickstart a response from the whole borough. Action is needed at all levels, from central government, yes, through to local partnerships, communities and individuals. And it's not too late to start the recovery of our wildlife, but we must work together to grasp the last chance and put things right for nature and wildlife in Basingstoke and Dean. I want to commend the work of our officers and the Cabinet member because we are not starting from scratch. This is not a zero-sum game. We need, through the support that work, to see a step change from us all, though, because our commitment needs to extend beyond parks and green spaces. We need our buildings and our streets and our open spaces to support wildlife and create more nature-friendly borough. We need developments to do the same. I know it's a broken record, but 18,000 homes will irrevocably be damaged to the ecology of our borough, and it's just incompatible to build that many units and think we can protect the wildlife and the environment and protect the River Test and the River Loddon. The two do not go together. This is about how we responsibly build and develop our borough so that humans don't threaten wildlife and instead support them to grow alongside us. We can't solve this issue overnight, but if we make sure we take and consider ecology when we choose where and how we build and we take major decisions, then we believe, and I believe, we can start to make major progress. The twin threats facing our natural world and our own lives, climate breakdown and ecological emergency, are now felt everywhere, including Basingstoke and Dean, as we witness dwindling wildlife and the loss of wild spaces. We can't wait for national government and international bodies to lead the way. We've got to show through collective action that we can make Basingstoke and Dean a borough where wildlife can thrive and the natural world can flourish. This is about stopping the loss of forever much loved species which were once common in gardens and parks and watersides and green spaces across the borough. But it's more than that, because we face losing all that wildlife abundance and a thriving natural world that protects us with clean air, clean water, healthy soils, food crops, natural flood defences and beautiful spaces for us all to enjoy. And from individuals to large organisations, we have to take the action now. There is no more time left to play with this issue. We have to take action now. So please pass the motion, declare the ecological emergency, build on the work that is currently underway, drive the agenda forward with some real vigour, and let's prove what we say in our actions. If we don't get serious, we are all going to have failed, and these words will mean nothing to future generations. And as I said in the speech I made earlier, I want to look young people in the eye and tell them I'm doing everything I can to save your future.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harvey. I've got Councillor Raffel down. I don't have anybody else at this juncture. So, Councillor Raffel, would you like to? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I thank the proposer and seconder for what they've said and for bringing this motion before the Chamber. I have wanted to bring something similar to this for some months. I've been approached by outside bodies to do it, but I had some reticence because the last time I tried to bring a motion to protect the natural environment, it got lost in the long grass, I think is the politest way of putting it. I think the way that this council seems to operate is it tends to prefer non-cabinet members to propose motions, and then it feels perhaps it's not being lectured to or manipulated or whatever it was that went wrong on the last occasion. We know that the natural environment is precious to us, and we know from the words spoken by many tonight and on previous occasions that the natural environment is something that has been neglected for too long. And this is about redressing the balance. Having taken over the portfolio holder as portfolio holder for, as I call it, climate improvement, because I want a positive outcome, not constantly have it running around saying it's an emergency. I've noted that I have actually got the synthesised portfolio of these two things. And everywhere I go, people say, what are you doing about those trees? Because they're good for the climate and they're good for the natural environment, to take an example, for instance, or the open grassland. What are you doing to protect that? Because we've got rich species in poor quality chalk grassland, which is so beautiful. It's part of what Mr. Beavers has been working on in Hatch Warren, and I fully support him. He knows that. And yet, why, on the other hand, do you think you're putting houses on them? And so these challenges need to be articulated. This motion is about, at long last, giving a voice to the natural environment and having policies that are saying that, at long last, we will be, hopefully, and I take on board the various points in the extra conditions here, looking at the natural environment running like that thread for climate change through everything we do as a council. I thought it'd be good just to mention that one of our partners, the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Tribe, said the following, and bear in mind we work so closely with them. It said this: we are facing two inextricably linked crises, the climate emergency and the steady decline of nature. We cannot solve one crisis without tackling the other. Nature's recovery is vital for tackling climate change. Thriving habitats can safely lock up vast amounts of carbon while providing other vital benefits that help us adapt, such as dealing with floods. Important habitats that lock carbon safely away and limit the effects of climate change include peatland, saltmarsh, fen and woodland. And they have committed themselves, and I suggest that we should commit ourselves to setting up work to restore vital habitats and natural climate solutions on a landscape scale, to call for natural climate solutions and nature's recovery to be the priority in tackling climate change, such as plans to achieve net zero, to continue to push for the creation of a national nature recovery network to restore thriving ecosystems and give wildlife space to adapt, and to ensure natural solutions are at the heart of local and national decision making, such as planning, and work to protect them from damaging development and infrastructure projects, and we should work to ensure people of all walks of life can connect with and enjoy nature for the benefit of our health and well-being. Great words there, and possibly will shape the work that we are to do. So I undertake, if I see no reason why I shouldn't be, carrying on with this, to commit myself, if this motion is passed, to carrying out the resolutions, bringing them before a committee. I somehow feel they straddle again EPH and CEP, and we'll have that little tussle, because all members need to be involved in this. In the initial stage, we need to gather in the ideas and then work forward. But it will appear on an agenda in front of some councillors soon, before the end of the year, with an update of where we're going, because we need to crack on. But there will be a resource implication for this, and we all need to bear that in mind, that as work goes up priorities, more officers need to be involved in making things happen. So please support the motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fell. Now, is it Councillor McCormick who wants to speak, or Councillor Chastain, or both of you? Both. Okay, perfect. Okay, Councillor McCormick first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this is long overdue. We've been suffering more than any other major economy, mainly because we were the first to be industrialised. But the loss of our habitat has been ongoing and accelerating for far too long. Back in the day, Kingsclere used to be part of Windsor Forest. The church at Kingsclere has got a bed bug on the weather vane as a result of an unfortunate overnight stay with King John, where he was hunting in Windsor Forest, got all the way out from Windsor, couldn't get back in time, decided to stay overnight in Kingsclere, got bitten by a bed bug. There's only remnants of that forest left now. I think Pamber Forest and one or two other bits in the borough that once was an enormous forest. And in Anglo-Saxon times, nearly all of this part of the country was forest of some description or another. And in the past 200 years, with progressive industrialisation, we've seen that change accelerate. If you see any pictures that the Historical Basingstoke Society have got of Basingstoke in the early 19th century, it's not recognisable. There's no railway, there's windmills, there's a whole host of things that have disappeared. And in the past 55 years, we've seen a decline in our songbirds by 90%. And some of the species that we grew up with, our children or grandchildren's generation are going to see hardly any of. The hedgehog, for instance, is an endangered species. Now, we do have some examples we can look at where we have done good work, and I think we need to build on those. The one that's close to my heart, which I will defer to Councillor Chastain as a Popley councillor, the Great Crested Newts in North Popley, when that was built, with a projected population of 1,500, when they actually got down to the translocation of newts, they found they had over 4,000 in a wide-ranging habitat that extended north to the Vine. So we don't know what we've got, and that is even more imperative why we should preserve it. On the media today was talk about how they were going to count walruses in the Arctic. The reason why they're doing that is because they don't know how many are still left. And it might be too late if we don't find out now and take the necessary actions to protect them. What can we do as residents? Well, hopefully, when we pass this motion and get the work, that will crystallise a lot of thoughts in our minds as members and the people we represent. There are lots of things that we could be doing right now, not paving over gardens, keeping our undergrowth, putting in gaps in fences for the aforementioned hedgehogs, looking after flowering plants, maybe having allotments, growing our own veg, and joining and supporting conservation groups. It's my vision that every area of the borough will have a conservation group actively engaged in maintaining our biodiversity. And yes, I would like to thank the Basingstoke Transition Network. I think they've got a whole lot to offer, and I would commend this motion to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCormick. Councillor Chastain.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll keep it short because it's obviously time's getting on and we've all heard lots, but it's obviously clear from everything everyone said that we are facing an ecological emergency. And like the climate emergency, we must recognise this, and they are both intertwined, as has already been said. And it makes perfect sense to consider both at once. But every action we take as a council that impacts our environment and ecology needs to be appropriate and work for the good of all. Others have already said about how this needs to be borough-wide. This cannot be done without a well-informed strategy and a collaborative approach across all departments within the council and ways to measure our impact. We can't just make these promises without making sure that we're actually seeing them through. So there is much focus tonight, we've heard, about future building plans, and obviously that has the biggest effect on the environment and climate and the ecology, rather than what we've already got. But it's vital we consider the impact from basic operational services that we do on a day-to-day basis. Things around space management, including things like the grass cutting, planting schemes, how we manage our car parks, how street cleansing is done. All those things can actually have an impact on the environment as well. And they can have an impact on lots of different diverse creatures as well. Sorry. Everything has to be considered. So we impact our environment and ecology by our decisions. And what we do will affect future generations. So we, as a council, have a responsibility to make sure we prevent further damage, and we also protect what we do have, and ideally we improve going forward. And so I urge you all to support this motion too.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tostin. Right, so we've got Councillor Konecki, if you want to sum up, or it sounds like there's an enormous amount of agreement in this room, and we're mindful of other motions, but yes.
Thank you, Madam. And I was going to say, I don't think there's any need for me to sum up. I think all of the speakers this evening have made some very powerful arguments in favour of this motion, and I hope that everyone supports it later on. Thank you.
Ooh. I don't know what I'm doing there. Sorry. Discovered a new noise. Great. Right, are we all in agreement? Agreed. Thank you very much. Going to spin the dial, and I am now going to ask for number 12. So number 12 is a motion about infrastructure. It is being proposed by Councillor Tomlin, and unfortunately, Councillor Konecki, you've got a double act as you're back on again. Councillor Tomlin, you have 5 minutes to speak to this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I forgot I was number 12. Apologies. So, in the motion, these words that our leader used at the recent EPH meeting, who would not agree with the sentiment behind them? Without infrastructure provision, then we will fail to make Basingstoke a place to want to live and thrive. We will make residents suffer with an ever-expanding borough, forever constrained within a challenged and stressful environment. Yes, we do need quality homes. Obviously, the number is dependent. They've got to improve the communities that we live in. Homes that meet our local needs, are well integrated with those communities, and improve our local residents' lives. We must have the right infrastructure. Not just roads, but schools, green infrastructure and health services. And it has been said, of course, that the climate change is the golden thread that must underpin our local plan review. But I would argue that this sits side by side with infrastructure provision. We need infrastructure. It's a key provider for our climate change goals. We live in a water supply stressed area. How are we to provide drinking water? We've heard Thames Water is discussing sewage. They've said they'd rather not build another house in Basingstoke. Indeed, they currently state no more houses in my ward at Bramley until its sewage system is fixed. And I fear Bramley is not the only one. Public transport solutions and road capacity need addressing. Many of our wards have seen increases in both housing stock and population from our current local plan period without infrastructure keeping pace. Back in 2015, when we were discussing an infrastructure delivery plan for the previous local plan, we showed at that time a shortfall of £200 million. We need to be seeing an updated report on this, on how we're doing and the plans on how we'll deliver further. So unless we incorporate infrastructure delivery policies into our local plan review, we must put infrastructure first and houses second. If we don't, then we will have failed. Madam Mayor, I cannot see for the life of me how we would not have universal support for this motion, so I therefore commend this motion to the Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tomlin. Councillor Konecki, would you like to second it now or reserve the right to speak later?
Can I break with tradition and reserve my right, please?
Absolutely, I'm all for breaking tradition every once in a while. Yes, it.
Yes, I'm very delighted to second it.
Do we have any speakers? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was delighted to see this motion come through and thank Councillors Tomlin and Konecki for introducing this motion. We need to ensure that the infrastructure needed to support our housing numbers, whatever that number is in place before the housing. And as Chair of EPH, I was very pleased to hear the leader promise in his speech to EPH on the 2nd of September of this year, that if it is within his power, he will ensure that the infrastructure is in first and the housing in second. I'm not sure, if this is a cabinet responsibility or the portfolio holder's responsibility to prepare the required policy with the support of officers, but I fully support this motion and urge all members to support this as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Frost. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to this other than the... okay. We've got Councillor Bown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's probably worth just picking up that point from Councillor Frost. Absolutely happy to pick up what EPH agreed, which was the infrastructure-led approach. And absolutely, just to clarify, that it's my responsibility with officers to come up with the infrastructure delivery plan. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't intending to speak, but I do think there's a bit of a difference between infrastructure-led and infrastructure first. Infrastructure first implies that you don't build housing and worry about the infrastructure later. Infrastructure-led could be considered to mean you will mitigate as best you can in the circumstances. I don't think that's what the Cabinet member means. We can debate this and wherever happens from here on in, but I support the point about infrastructure first. I agree with the Leader of the Council. Infrastructure goes in first and the housing goes in second. That is the point and I support that. I'm sure we could debate that in other places.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harvey. Anybody else? Oh, sorry, I do apologise. Do you know, I think it's this new barrier. It's difficult. Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sure the Winklebury members would want to look at what we're doing with Many Down and have that as the example of putting infrastructure in before we do anything else. And two key points on that. If we put the infrastructure in first, then Winklebury residents wouldn't be looking at the prospect of years of additional construction traffic going along Winklebury Way and Roman Road. If we put the infrastructure in first off the A339, the construction traffic could go in there. So that's a practical example we could look at in signing up to this. And also building the secondary school. Instead of having active land provision, which could be taken away, the prospect of a school being built in 15 or 20 years' time, why don't we build that school now? I know that there will be arguments about school numbers and things like that, but we had 1,000 secondary school aged children going out of Basingstoke town to schools in the surrounding area, and in the context of a climate emergency, that's obscene that we've got children commuting many miles and adding to carbon footprint in a planet we're expecting them to save, because we've signally failed to do so thus far. The other thing I would say is that we do have an infrastructure deficit at the moment, and we need to address that. That's evidenced in the congestion that we've got in the borough, and especially the Basingstoke town area, and the problems we've got in certain locations with air quality. Now, I know that there's other factors that might come in, because we'll be looking at reducing particulate emissions through reduction of carbon, carbon-based fuel consumption. But I think we really do need to grasp this nettle now, recognise that our infrastructure deficit is holding us back, and do something about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCormick. Have we, the Leader would like to speak?
Thank you, everyone. And I reiterate the words that are on the motion. just to confirm that we will have control of education if we become a unitary council. I don't propose that's going to happen in the near future, but I rest assured if that power is given to me, I will look to build the schools first and the roads first and the infrastructure first, so as housing can slot in behind it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader. Anybody else like to add to this? Are we all agreed? Agreed. Excellent, thank you very much. Right, the next one that I would like to call is number 15. And it is about members' advisory panels. And it is being proposed by Councillor McCormack and seconded by Councillor Howard Sorrell. Councillor McCormack, would you like to propose this motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to propose this motion. We live in unprecedented times in Basingstoke-on-Dean. Our town is on its knees. We need urgent action to save so many things at once: the ice rink, the Camrose ground, the town centre, Basing View, our natural environment. We have the greatest challenge in human history in the climate emergency. We have numerous challenges with the local plan. We've had dozens of meetings in the past few months on these issues, but the public is none the wiser. They've been held behind closed doors. They see it as secret meetings, and it's not right. This isn't the council's future. It belongs to the people of Basingstoke. It isn't our money. It belongs to the people of Basingstoke. Residents' ideas should be captured right from the outset. We owe them at least that much. Making these meetings a matter of public record will also demonstrate the work we are doing and subject it to a healthy degree of public scrutiny. What does it say about us if we can't even record our meetings on matters of such importance and report back to the public? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCormack. Councillor Howard Sorrell, would you like to reserve the right to speak later, or would you like to second it and speak now?
I'll second it now, but speak later. Is that? Yeah. Cool.
Brilliant. Okay, I've got Councillor Raffel, who's signalled he wishes to speak. I don't have currently any other speakers on my list.
Well, Madam Mayor, I oppose this motion. I think it's misguided to say that members' advisory panels should be in public. When we have been having a series of members' advisory panels dealing with the local plan and climate change recently, of course, the members of the public came to EPH committee for a whole night before we'd had the maps. So it's a nonsense to say the public aren't consulted. It's nonsense to say they're not consulted before we even start to consider matters. We do consult the public. I'm in favour of them remaining private, and I think I've been a cabinet member for about 7 years. I've had multiple MAP meetings, and I haven't had a single complaint from a single councillor or a single member of the public about them. And the reason for that, I would suggest, is because they work well. And indeed, the irony of all of this is, if the public could actually see how we behaved at MAPS, they'd be in shock. Because we're so grown up and so sensible. There's no student politics. There's no ranting, no playing to the press gallery, no embarrassment when we get it wrong and say, oh, yes, you're right, we got that completely wrong. Because we just work well. And we've achieved so much together. I achieved a lot. We achieved a lot in the last local plan, and I feel we're achieving a lot in the current local plan on the parts that I have matters to deal with. And I certainly feel that we're achieving a lot on the climate change parts, that are the actions that I'm trying to introduce. And MAPS, for me, have been the necessary space where we can go round and round the houses as long as we like on any subject, without getting the pressure of a committee timetable telling us to hurry up, without us having to say, oh no, well you've chatted on that, move on. We can just keep talking. We can always meet on another day if we need to. And the work that we do isn't a decision-making situation, because all the decisions are still made at committee or by cabinet in public, and members of the public can still influence them. But what it does do is allow us to try and stress test ideas, to dump the bad ones, and to hopefully coalesce about the good ones. And I would say every map I've been involved in, the agreement we've got maybe on, say, 80% of things, has been good to get that agreement, and we've stuck with that 80% when we then bring it out into the light of day with the public. So what could be possibly wrong with them, and why dump something that currently works? For me, it's a bit like a chef. A chef does preparation in the morning, but you don't invite the diners along to see what you're doing. And then in the evening, once the cooking starts, yes, the committee can see what's going on, and they can contribute. And if they don't like it, they can eject it, and we go back to the start. And then, of course, we serve it up at full council or to an inspector in due course. So, for me, they work. And I can tell you, Madam Mayor, if this motion is passed, I shall do my best to ignore it. And if I'm told I can't ignore it, then we're going to have a right dog's dinner going forwards. Because how are we supposed to collaborate if those amongst us will immediately want to behave like we sometimes do in this chamber, not tonight so far, and play to the gallery and engage in, oh my goodness, my electorate won't want to hear me saying that, because it's contrary to what I've been saying in my election leaflets. When in fact, the electorate might well want to hear that you're realistic and can take an alternative point of view. And most of the electorate are totally opposed to the stupid politics we play most of the time. They just want things done. So we're achieving things in maps, and I really hope we can carry on forward. If we don't, I think it will power up politics and power down common sense. And so I ask all members to oppose this motion and let us carry on with the good work that we're doing in maps currently.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rafal. Councillor James.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't sure what I was going to do until Councillor Rafal spoke, and now I know I'm right to support this motion. I'm not sure he read it, to be honest. To make members' advisory panels public, that's about awareness. In terms of referring to the public taking participation, that's something to be referred to the Constitutional Working Party to look at and explore whether that's practical. I see no reason not to make the public aware that we're having these meetings. It's reassuring. If you just look at committee papers, there are subjects like the town centre strategy, for instance, that didn't appear anywhere. It was nothing. It wasn't even happening. Lots of meetings took place. Unfortunately, normally on the same night as audit and accounts, which is one of the problems with maps. They're not in the calendar, so often you find you can't go to them anyway. In the modern world in which all these things are on a screen, we generally sit at home. There's no reason for the public not to be able to watch them afterwards. I think as councillors we can be grown up. I know Councillor Rafal may find it difficult. I think we should support this motion. It's going to go to the Constitutional Working Party to look at. Councillor McCormack sits on that, so do I, so that's half the committee is already in support of this. Unfortunately, if Councillor Rafal doesn't like us changing the rules and doesn't want to stick to the Constitution, I'm sure he can find something else to do with his time, perhaps volunteer to support biodiversity in his local area rather than being a councillor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor James. Councillor Donoghue.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to agree with Councillor James that once you spoke, Councillor Rafal, I kind of changed my mind and decided to massively support this motion. If you look on the internet and read what people think of councillors, some of the horrible things that they say about us, and yet Councillor Rafal says that these panels work so well and we behave so well on them, and they're such a fantastic example of what brilliant work we do. We should hide them from the public and not let them see how well we're doing. I mean, that's astonishing. And the suggestion that if we do pass the motion, he'll ignore it, well, that's a kind of undemocratic attitude that drives this motion and drives the point behind this motion. And then the astonishing analogy of the kitchen and the chef that wants to hide his kitchen from the public, doesn't want environmental services to see what the state of the ovens are, doesn't want to see what's going on in the kitchen, doesn't want to see if the kitchen floor has been cleaned, doesn't want to see how well it's been looked after, just wants to eat what the food comes out onto the plate on pure faith. And if anybody says, could I possibly just have a look and see if the spoons are clean? No, don't you dare. I think that this motion is a huge step forward in enhancing people's trust in councils and councillors, which is a pretty low ebb. And I really would ask people, it's not a sweeping motion. It doesn't ask us to go completely drains up. I do understand the point about wanting to be able to discuss and debate things in an open way without having people hanging on your every word and picking on every tiny debating point that you might want to make. But the motion looks to put forward minutes of the meetings, not to necessarily record them and publish them live. I can understand the anxiety around that. And we all know how well minutes can be written and how carefully minutes can be phrased in a way not to make people look completely stupid, unlike my live speech may make me look completely stupid. But I really do think we should support this motion, because I think if we don't, we're simply going to confirm the opinions that many members of the public already have of this council and of us councillors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Fillmore, please.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm very brief in support of this motion. It's a democracy. We're not a secret society, are we? We're a democracy. We're here, we represent people who have voted for us or voted against us. We represent the people of our particular wards. It's not a secret society, and I'm very perturbed, not just about maps, but about people that are quoting from studies that have been denied to others.
Thank you, Councillor Fillmore. Is there anybody else, or shall I ask Councillor McCormick to sum up? Oh, sorry. Oh, I do apologise. I'm sorry. Dropping the ball. Councillor Howard Sorrell, would you like to now second?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Oh, yeah. I was eager to hear from Councillor Raffel, because, as we all know, he's a barrister. So it's part of his job to hide information from certain groups of people. It's so it might be within his nature to do so, but that doesn't mean he should apply that attitude to being a councillor. At the end of the day, all we're asking is for sharing of information. We want information that's currently not public to become public. That's a fairly reasonable request. As my colleague has already stated, it's not as though we're asking for active public participation at this stage. We're asking for that potential outcome to be reviewed as to whether or not it's feasible. Councillor Raffel also mentioned good and bad ideas being put through the ringer to establish into which category they fall. If members of the public do become involved, I would also like to point out that often they'll come up with good ideas themselves. We are not the elite of this town. We are a group of people who happen to have stood for public office. So if we want the best ideas, we need full engagement from all members of our borough, in my opinion at least. Yeah, that's all I have to say really. I'm in support of this motion, and I hope that I can continue my winning streak of motions that I support.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howard Sorrell, and sorry for forgetting you. Right. Would you like to sum up, Councillor McCormick?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I interpret Councillor Fell's input as nervousness about the fact that some of the things that we might want to test bed in private might remain private. I think there is always that option, even with public meetings, to have pink papers or even to ask that things go into confidential session, and I wouldn't see maps or any of the other panels that we've got being any different from that, to be honest. If there's things that have to be discussed in private, they have to be discussed in private, but I think that the meeting outcome records should be made public. I don't see any contention with that. You mentioned that we can go around the houses for as long as we like on a particular subject. Well, the public perception is that we have been going around the houses for the last 2 years on the ice rink and on the climate emergency, and there have been quite a few meetings of the climate emergency map, but most of the public are none the wiser as to when they're going to see charge points appear in their streets. We do have a plan, we're just afraid to share it. I think we should be a bit more bold than that, and I think we should be looking at a greater inclusion of people like the Transition Network and various nature conservation groups to help inform our policy, because you've got 54 people, we can't have all the ideas to ourselves. It's better if we cast our net wide. These are challenges that we've never seen before in our lifetimes. And to have all these things discussed in private meetings when there's public clamouring for action, wanting to monitor progress on matters of such gravity as the climate emergency, I think that it's only fair and proper that if it were to remain a map, it would be a public thing. What I would also say at this point is that the Constitutional Working Group will be looking at all things anyway, and hopefully we will come up with something that's acceptable to this council. But I would caution that if you decide to reject this motion, it sends a very damaging signal about the reputation of this council to the people out there who elect us and pay their council taxes for us to oversee delivery of services. Thank you.
Yes, of course you can.
An unusual point of order. It was made, I would like to distance myself from any remark that was made by others in relation to Councillor Fell being a barrister and hiding stuff and used to hiding stuff. I think it's unfair, and it should be corrected for the public record, that Councillor Fell as a barrister is subject to strict rules of disclosure. He does not hide stuff. He cannot hide stuff. I have worked with him in a professional capacity. I may think he's a lousy councillor, but he's certainly a very professional barrister who works to a very high standard and has unquestionable conduct in that field. Thank you.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. Can you just hold on one second? I just want to have one conversation with Fiona, please. Sorry to bother you. Sorry, I'm just having a little debate because a number of you have made a reference to the maps being publicly accountable. Obviously, the motion actually refers to it being made public, but actually in our constitution, because I'm a bit of a nerd, putting it mildly, 4.25, it does say, in relation to working parties, that the process must be open and publicly accountable, even though these meetings may be held in private. So I just want for the public to understand that there is a nuance between the motion here, as I understand it, which is that all maps should be public, and a requirement in our constitution that the process must be open and publicly accountable. And furthermore, in D, it says, provided, and it talks about the meeting should be published and their conclusions and actions should be recorded and accessible to all councillors. Provided that this course is followed, there should be no course concern about public accountability. So I do think there's a slight mismatch here in relation to the Constitution, I'm afraid. So that's something for you guys in the Constitutional Working Party, but it's not clear cut. So that's why I say, right, are we going to take it to the vote? Do you want it recorded? Yeah, okay, cool. Recorded votes. Sorry? Oh, I apologise. Apparently I've forgotten to get people to summing up. I am really losing it now. Oh, I did? But Councillor Howard Sorrell, yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, we have summed up. I have been humbled and a point has been proven to me that I should always write my speech in advance rather than trying to speak off the cuff, because poorly worded jokes clearly can be misinterpreted. I would like to apologise. I respect that Councillor Raphael is a professional, and I was merely trying to make the point that in his capacity as a barrister, he keeps information confidential on behalf of his client. It wasn't a personal insult, it was a comment on the profession. So I just wanted to make that clear. But thank you for allowing me to do so.
Okay, right, let's go to the vote, please. Can everybody please vote? I haven't voted yet. Right. Right, we're ready to close, and the motion has been defeated. 20, I can't see, it's 29 noes and 19 yeses. So I'm afraid the motion has been defeated. So we move on to the next one. Right, we move on to number 18, which is the West Ham Leisure Park. Got half an hour left, and you guys are doing really well. I have to say, I think you should clap, congratulate yourselves at how well we're doing. So let's see if we can keep up the good work. Right, this motion is regarding the West Ham Leisure Park wider vision. It is being proposed by Councillor Jones and seconded by Councillor Freeman. Would you like to propose, Councillor Jones? Thank you.
So I've got Colin Regan's old microphone, so I may go a bit...
A bit red.
Oh, definitely that. Yeah, this motion. I think we saw tonight the concern of the people with the ice hockey thing outside. What I'd like to see, personally, is the fact that we can talk to people, not just on ice hockey, but on everything. Basingstoke seems to be falling about our ears when we talk about sport. It doesn't seem to be happening, and we get quotes back about how much money we're spending and everything else. What we need to do is find out what people want in this town and try to achieve it. I think the problem we're having, as I say, we've got the ice rink, the aquadrome, we've got the football club. We meet people in our meetings, but we don't actually ask them the right questions, or we should be out there asking questions. I'd like to see it across all the wards, actually, to visit the wards and say, what do you want in our sports and leisure? In our leisure park, you know, I don't know what's happening there. I'm a councillor, so what do the public think? We don't know what's actually happening. We need to know. So what I'm saying to you is I don't want to be knocking the portfolio holder or anybody over this side, but people need to know what's going on. I've lived in Basingstoke most of my life, and what we did have, and I don't think we've got now, if I'm really honest, was a good sports and recreation. We seem to be falling away. And what I'm asking this council to support this, go to CEP and see if we can talk to people and get something straight so they know where we're coming from. Because at the moment, I don't think anybody knows what's happening anywhere. I will say, I was on CEP, we did look at the ice rink, and there was a lot of work done. but we're not actually getting the message across that things are actually happening, or if they're happening, or we can't do it. The public needs to know, not just councillors, the public. That's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Right, the seconder is Councillor Freeman. Would you like to second it, please? And then confirm whether you would like to speak now or...
I'll second it and speak briefly now, if you
Okay.
don't mind. I'd just like to ask that everybody supports this motion. I think with the leisure park, if with a little bit of innovation, a little bit of forward thinking, this could be a really great leisure destination for not only residents of Basingstoke, but the wider area. We've got the ice rink, we've got the aquadrome, we could put the football stadium there, we could turn this into a top-class leisure destination, and all we just need is a little bit of innovation and to be brave enough to do this. We have members of the public often come up with fantastic ideas. It needs to be something that we do as a council that involves residents so that they can take this topic, own it, use it, and, you know, really, this could be the jewel in Basingstoke's crown. A brilliant leisure destination. We need vision to see it as something more. If we invest in it, it could be a lot. It could be something really, really good for Basingstoke. Something we can say, we did this. It's amazing. Come and visit. I hope everybody will support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Freeman. Right, I've got Councillor Donohoe down. I haven't got any other speakers at this... Oh, Councillor hasn't. I didn't see his hand.
Go for it.
Really?
You're already on the screen.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I think that we really do need vision and ambition to develop the town. At a recent consultation, which many of the councillors here attended, we were asked by consultants to contribute to what we think the vision should be about the regeneration of the town centre and of Basingstoke. And there was a major structural problem in that consultation. And we talked with the consultants at length and discovered that their remit was to develop the town centre and to look very carefully at developing and improving and enhancing the culture. And we asked them a straight up question, does that culture include sport and leisure? And they very clearly said, no, it doesn't. Which is an astonishing omission. How can you exclude sport and leisure from culture? You can't. And I would urge every councillor in this chamber to use all their good offices to change that remit, including the Cabinet. You cannot exclude sport and leisure from the culture and the regeneration of this town. And at the very heart of that regeneration, which does include sport and leisure, is the leisure park. We must develop the leisure park, we must connect it to the regeneration of the town centre, and that leisure park is, as Councillor Freeman has said, it's the absolute heart of any development of the future of this town. There is so much that can be done there. And before I finish, I'd like to say, only partly tongue-in-cheek, that before we build any more houses, before we build too much more infrastructure, this town needs a Lido. And following Councillor Harvey's speech earlier on, it needs to be a solar-powered Lido with a fantastic cafe attached to it and music and dance and culture all around it. Sport and leisure needs to be at the heart of what we're going to do in the future. And so I would ask for that remit to be changed somehow and for us to place a lot of focus on the future of the leisure park as a leisure park. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Donohoe. I've got Councillor Isaac, I understand now.
Sorry? No, yours isn't.
Sorry, is somebody talking?
To start with, I really don't support this negative doing down commentary we're receiving this evening about our town. I agree that the leisure park has got great potential, and I expect we'll be able to update councillors and our residents shortly on our proposals for the leisure park. To the motion, as the portfolio holder responsible for our leisure park regeneration, I support this motion and will act on it as I've done before. It is absolutely right that our residents are involved in the further development of the vision for their leisure park. I know from past experience that such engagement brings forth valuable new ideas and tells us what residents want and don't want from a modernised leisure park. Also, officers and I, as always, stand ready to update Councillor Vaux and the CEP councillors periodically on our progress with the leisure park.
Thank you very much. Councillor Isaac, I've got Councillor James, followed by Councillor Harvey at the moment. Does anybody else wish to contribute to this debate?
Madam Mayor, very brief. The difficulties with the leisure park can be traced back to the origins, and that was the leisure park map, and I thought they were performing well.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's interesting, isn't it, that we're here talking about the future vision of the leisure park when I remember sitting in a meeting with Councillor Watts and Councillor James nearly 7 years ago, discussing and receiving a presentation from a certain area saying, we're going to do this, this is the vision of the leisure park. And I think we have a choice to make in the future. We'll be given an opportunity now to think about the future of our leisure park in a way that we can discuss what residents would like as participatory leisure, which is not going to make a profit, which is not going to generate a lot of money, but what our residents will value because they will be able to take part in leisure in a way that encourages communities to come together, groups and organisations to come together, and that is powerful. If we only see the leisure park, and that's perhaps been the falling out over the vision that was, where it's about making money and it's about leisure activities that only some people can take part in, then we're not going to succeed. Now, I don't believe that's where we're going, and I hope that isn't where we're going, and I take the portfolio holder at face value in the direction he's trying to set. But that's the challenge, and we'll be challenging and holding his feet to the fire on that, I'm sure. It also means that you don't carve up the leisure park and try and get things on it that isn't leisure. The leisure park is the leisure park, and it should stay the leisure park, because that's what our residents, I genuinely believe, want. It shouldn't be carved up for housing in the future, and it shouldn't be carved up for retail in the future. It should be a leisure park. And if this council has to put its hand in its pocket to pay and invest in that to make it happen, then that may well be a challenge that we have to face, but it's something that we should do. As much as introduce leisure in a constructive way to the town centre, in a way I do believe is being talked about and discussed. So really, we've got a bit of a leisure agenda across the whole of the town, and we need to seize that agenda and make it really link to what our residents want, and in particular, what our ice rink supporters want, because they've been banging on this door for long enough and they genuinely deserve an answer. I mean, come on, they do deserve an answer, as difficult as it is, and I don't underestimate how difficult it is. It was difficult when the Aquadrome was changed and the Lido was originally changed and built as its current format. The other point to bear in mind is just how much capital is going to have to be spent improving those other facilities that we've lost over the last few years because of everything that's gone on. I don't underestimate the challenge. I just want to seize the agenda and seize the initiative in the way that delivers for our residents, and I hope that that's the direction the Cabinet member's going to go in.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'll just go over what I said before. It's not about politics, anything else. It's about residents, what they want, and they want to know what's going on. People don't stand out in the cold or in the rain protesting, which they've been doing for the last, 18 months, 2 years, or whatever. I've been on the meetings. They want to know what's going on. And I think we've got to look at, you say we're knocking Basingstoke, but we've got to say the way it is sometimes. We've got to be proud of where we live, and we've got to be proud of what we got in there. So I'll leave it to you. I hope you all vote for this. This is not a knocking shot of your side against ours. It's what people want in the borough. Thank you. I hope you understand what I meant there. And it was my maiden speech.
Okay, right. A little light relief. It's 13 minutes past 9. We're going to vote. Is everybody agreed, or are we going to take it to the vote? Agreed. Right, the next one on the agenda item I'm going for is number 17. And it's about the Hampshire waste recycling. Councillor Donohoe is proposing and Councillor Freeman is to second. Councillor Donohoe, would you like to propose this motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm aware that when we first proposed this motion within our own group, when I put forward this motion and asked for it to be put forward, but that since then there have been some changes to the booking system, and clearly the Cabinet are liaising with Hampshire County Council already. And so you may think this motion is redundant, and I don't think it is, and I would ask you to support it in a way simply to ask for the continuation perhaps of that liaison. And I'd like to make 3 points, and I'll try and be brief. Behind this motion, in my mind, were three major ideas, three things I'd like to see happen, which residents have put to me when I've been out on casework, talking to people, and dealing with fly tipping issues and so on. The first one is that the changes to the booking system are welcome, but they're not quite enough. We do need to continue to liaise with Hampshire to improve the booking system and to continue to make changes, to continue to get it updated more quickly and so on. Those kind of technical details, I will leave the details for later, but I'd ask you to continue to look to improve that. But two other things which I think are equally important, and the first one is this, that residents have said to me, and a number of residents have said this idea, I've talked it through with them, and it's the idea of having a day off, a booking day off, where you don't have to book. There are a number of our residents who find it difficult to book. Now, you know, I stand here with a master's degree in computer science, and sometimes I find booking systems difficult. But some of our residents do find it difficult. It isn't always as easy as we think it is. We're used to using computers all day long. Some people aren't. Some, to stereotype a little bit, some older people aren't. Some people who don't have their own cars and have to rely on other people's cars to get them there. You know, one resident said to me, I can't book it, I can't register my car because I don't know whether my niece is going to take me or my cousin or my son. I don't know who's going to take me. I'm scrounging up a lift or something. So I do think there would be enormous value in 1 day a week or 1 day a fortnight where we could ask Hampshire, would it be possible to have a booking-free day? And if that happened during the day when many people might be at work, and so perhaps the people who don't work and possibly are less likely to have their own car, could then fit that in easy. And I think that would find an opportunity to use the asset that we have more effectively. And finally, the opening hours. I looked at the opening hours and it closes before I get home from work some days. And to use a business term, I really think we should be sweating this asset. We are not going to be building a new tip anytime soon. They cost millions, and you know we're lobbying for it, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. So we really should be trying our hardest to make as much use and get as much value out of the asset that we do have, and at the same time helping our residents to dispose of their rubbish and their waste, and addressing the dangers and problems of fly tipping in our communities, and enhancing our recycling rates and addressing our biodiversity issues and our climate change issues at the time. So I think there are three genuine ideas there, so I don't think this motion is redundant, and I would ask you to support it in order to keep the inertia going and the impetus going on that liaison with Hampshire, because it does need to continue to be improved. So I hope to support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't think you meant to keep the inertia. I think you meant the yeah. Really? You don't want to keep the inertia, do you? Okay. Right. So seconder is Councillor Freeman. Would you like to second it and speak to it, or reserve your right?
I'll second, but I'll reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Right, I've got Councillor Eachus who wishes to speak. I haven't got any other speakers at this juncture. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in response to this motion, just in relation to the points that are raised, the limitation on one visit per week was lifted by Councillor Humby of Hampshire County Council on the 4th of October. Bookings for the HWRCs can now be made up to 7 days in advance, and a telephone booking line does exist for the HWRCs. This is primarily for those residents who are able to go online to book. The number is the same as the other HCC waste and recycling inquiries. It's open 5 days a week from 9 till 5, although 4:30 on a Friday. But the booking online is still the quickest and easiest way of booking a slot. In response to the rest of the issues around HWRC, obviously that is Hampshire County Council, and we do work quite closely with them in that regard and will continue to do so. The executive member there did take a paper in July, and at paragraph 23 in that report, it confirmed that HCC officers are shortly commencing a county-wide review of all the HWRCs in the county. That will include future provision with a view to making recommendations to us in 2022. So any ideas that the move of the motion had can be fed into that HCC consultation, which will be ongoing, and they have confirmed that they're committed to working with us on opportunities moving forward. All the other items that were mentioned, then yes, they're priority items for this council. They're all things that these are the ones in the motion, they're all things that are being done at the moment. Waste disposal, bring banks, bulky waste, household waste, all of those. The fly tipping element is coming to the CP committee anyway in January, which isn't that long away now, and I can happily put something in there, an update on HWRCs. We will continue to work with Hampshire County Council. We've got the government's National Resource and Waste Strategy consultation process ongoing. That will then be ratified through the Environmental Bill, and we understand advice and legislation will be completed in February 2022. So Cabinet will work with officers and HCC to update on that, and it will be brought to members through the appropriate channels in committees. So we'll continue to work with HCC, sorry again, mixed up my H's. So I continue to work with Hampshire County Council. I do thank the mover for this motion, but we can't support it because everything he's suggesting has already been done by Councillor Humbeys. Most of this is a Hampshire County Council thing, and everything that we deal with is ongoing. It is a priority. Stuff is coming to committee in January, and everything else will be coming to committee and to members in due course.
Thank you very much, portfolio holder. Are there any other people who wish to talk to this motion, speak to this motion? Oh, yes, sorry. I'm sorry. Councillor Ganesh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since we've had our full council meeting in July, there are a lot of progress made on the particular issue, and thanks for the update from Councillor Eaches. I may not agree with the entire motion, but there are some sections that I agree, and working collaboratively with Hampshire County Council with the hope of that will improve the issue. I will be in favour of supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ganesh. Right, are we going to take a... Oh, sorry. Okay, Councillor Howard-Sorrell, thank you.
Thank you. I just briefly wanted to raise a point. Councillor Each has mentioned that there's a phone booking system to support residents who can't use computers as effectively as they might be required to in order to make a booking. I speak as somebody whose partner works as a British Sign Language interpreter, and as you might imagine, a telephone isn't particularly useful to somebody who's deaf. There's a very large community of elderly deaf people in this country, and from what I've heard, there's no feasible way for them to make a booking without hiring an interpreter in advance. So if this motion doesn't support it, can I at least request that the councillor maybe consider that and maybe make some sort of recommendation to Hampshire County Council with regards to making it more deaf accessible? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, Councillor Donohoe, would you like to sum up, please?
Yeah, I would just like to ask everybody to support the motion in order to maintain the impetus behind the liaisons and the work that is going on already. And really just to make a statement from this chamber that we really do want you to push Hampshire County Council as hard as possible to as I say, to sweat that asset as much as possible. And I think if we turn down this motion, we're saying everything's fine, everything's hunky-dory, and if our residents are watching, they're going to think it's do nothing time again. So let's not do nothing. Let's just, you know, push hard as we can to keep the impetus going. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. Oh, Councillor Freeman did... I'm sorry, I really am dropping a lot of balls. I didn't allow you to speak. You decided to reserve. Did you want to say anything?
It's fine, thank you, Madam Mayor.
I'm so sorry. It wasn't personal.
I'd just like to say that I think that this is a good motion, and I know that some of the work is already being done, but as Councillor Donohoe said, we need to keep pushing for Hampshire County Council to make sure that the tip is accessible to more people on a more frequent basis, especially given the fact that we are reducing by a vast amount the amount of bring banks available locally for people to recycle their things. So it would be better if we can expand on what we're doing. So what we're doing is great. We need to keep it going. Please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I hope you accept my apology. Right. Luckily, I've got good wingmen. Right. And women. We take it to the vote, or is everyone agreed? I think not everyone, because the portfolio holder indicated that she was not going to support it. Do we want to take a vote? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, if we could take a vote, that'd be great. I think everybody's voted. So the motion has been lost, 20 for, 24 against. It has not been carried. Right, we move on to the final one of the motions, and it is number... well, not quite. Okay, can I suspend standing orders? Thank you to whomever's advising me. I'm still pretty much a newbie. It looks like we can get to the end of this agenda item, which means we won't have to access either of those two dates. So is everybody minded to push it to 10 o'clock if possible? Thank you very much. So that's an agreement to suspend standing orders and to push it to 10. Thank you. Right, moving speedily on then, because we've got a couple of questions from members as well. Councillor Harvey, would you like to propose this? And Councillor Godison is seconding it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In 2011, the Conservative government announced a really brave new policy, promoting localism. I thought that was a seminal moment in the relationship between national and local government. 11 years on, I am sad to say that the hope instilled with that act has withered on the vine of centralising tendencies in Whitehall. All governments of all persuasions talk of devolution, but they all eventually give in to their natural inclination to hoard power. If we are to believe the reports and briefings on Michael Gove's intentions as the Secretary of State emanating from the Tory party conference, that levelling up will dramatically change and alter the balance between north and south, that councils will once again be allowed to determine local housing numbers based on local evidence and not imposed by algorithms based on 7-year-old data, then my concern, and I will share, is that we don't find ourselves in a position of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because we march on with our local plan process while the national scene changes. The pause we're calling for is not that we do not carry on collating evidence or preparing our local plan, but that we don't drive into a tunnel that we cannot reverse out of. There is a sensible and logical process we could follow, not a multi-track process where we proceed to run at 90 miles an hour rather than walk with care. I've been a councillor through 3 local plan processes, and this one feels rushed. Why are we rushing? This is a local plan review. We're supposed to be considering our already adopted local plan, not rewriting it from scratch. The consequences of our actions will be revisited on our residents for years to come, and that responsibility weighs heavy. Someone for whom I have great respect in this chamber said to me this week, and as you know from experience, Paul, there is a big difference between being the decision maker who carries out the responsibility for consequences and being in opposition. I say I understand that and I feel it. The local plan is all our responsibility, every single one of us in this chamber. This cannot be a process that becomes a political battle. There are no cheap wins in the local plan. I don't think I've ever been more serious about this, and I know I'm not the only one, and I respect people's approach to the local plan from across this chamber. This is not a process you can fast track without threatening its integrity and risking it unravelling at the examination in public. We need to learn from our experiences over the last few years, and our policies need to be stronger and more protective of the things that we care about. We should not be embracing permissive language which allows developers to get away with it. The policies as currently presented aren't offering us a stronger local plan. The pause we need is to reflect carefully on the changing landscape we see in the national picture. On the Environment Bill, shortly to become Act, for example, which is fundamental when so many of the sites that we see promoted are on the most environmentally sensitive land in our borough. Or on the Planning Bill, which is shortly to be rewritten. We need to understand the shape of decision making, which may fundamentally alter what we can do. We can't caveat everything with, we'll do our best to incorporate it as and when we can, or therein we may miss a critical direction we would want to go in. We can't somehow retrofit that because it's so fundamental. We have a crisis in our borough. We need to decide where and what we do want to build and where we do and do not want to build. And understand that where we can build, because people are in housing need, needs to be very carefully chosen. There is a housing crisis. There is an environmental crisis. How we define the future of our borough cannot be rushed, because if we do, we risk far more damage. We have to get this right. The argument is made that it's too dangerous to pause, it's too much of a risk because we have to meet the challenge laid down by government to deliver a local plan review, which I understand. But I'm not here to do the government's bidding. I'm here to represent our residents like we all are. And when the consequences of this process are so significant, when we are told by Thames Water that we cannot build the houses because of the water stress our area is under, and when the Cabinet member gives us quotations from a water cycle study none of us have seen, the damage we may do to our environment could be too much, way too much. When we talk seriously about climate change and the consequences of building 18,000 houses that will destroy irreplaceable habitat, or building on the AONB, or suggesting thousands of houses could be built in the town centre to make up the difference, I think we really need to draw breath. We need a local plan that we and our communities can support, not one where we are offered a Hobson's choice. We have to be better than that, and that maybe means drawing breath to understand the consequences of our choices before us so that we can change those options with meaningful understanding of the evidence, the whole evidence, on water, transport and sustainability. I want to see the greenest local plan. I want localism to be fulfilled.
I'm sorry, your time's run out.
And I want us to pay lip service to a local plan.
Thank you very much.
I don't want to pause for no good reason. I want us to pause for our reasons.
Thank you very much. Right. Sorry. Got Councillor Godison who's seconding. Do you wish to speak now and second? I'll speak now. Okay. Councillor Godison, could you put your microphone on? 'Cause I don't know if you're on. 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 Thank you very much, Councillor Godison. Right, I have 3 people on the list at the moment. I have Councillor James. Would you like to?
I can't support this motion for a simple reason. Earlier on tonight, I supported a motion around infrastructure. Now, that means I can't really support a pause. The idea that somehow you can just pause a local plan but carry on doing it seems a bit skewed. You can't possibly persuade anybody to build a dual carriageway to nowhere on the basis that one day it might be somewhere. No one's going to build a school in an empty field in the hopes that someday someone might build houses around it. Simply not going to happen. It's called a local plan, not a housing plan. It all works together. You have to plan. Now, earlier on this evening, we also said we thought the 17,000 number was too high. I agreed with that. We can go back to government. We can say we think it's too high. We'd like to see the evidence. Trying to get a mindless government to change its mind is going to be a real challenge. We tried it with permitted development rights a few years ago and got nowhere with that. So on that basis, we have to plan for the likelihood that we are going to have to build somewhere close, at least, to the total houses we've been given. But we must plan. You cannot pause. The other problem we have is we can say pause in here. It's not going to stop the construction industry. Developers will continue to buy land. They will continue to speculate. They will continue to try and get planning applications in. And whilst we're in the middle of pause, they'll probably get the planning inspector on side. I think most important, Madam Mayor, and it's an issue to go straight to your heart, is the conversation we're going to have with Thames Water. When we turn around to Thames Water and say, how are you going to cope with 17,000, or potentially there's a contingency in there at 16,000, I think, 16,000 new homes over the next plan period. Now, they might have an answer to that. If, however, we go and say, how are you going to cope with the homes we're going to build, they're going to say, how many are you going to build? And we're going to say, we don't know, we're pausing. So I don't think we can pause. You can't plan if you're pausing. I think Councillor Harvey indicated we'd carry on doing the research, we'd carry on doing all this stuff, but somehow it's a pause. It's not. That's doing the local plan. You do the whole lot together. That's the point of it. I think sometimes last time round, the reason we're so short of infrastructure, because we wasted so many years arguing about numbers, rather pointlessly. You'll remember it well. We had the Labour government imposing top-down numbers. All the Tories said that was bloody awful, terrible thing to do, because the planning inspector said you've got to build 850 homes a year. Eric Pickles turns up, he says, no, local, you can decide now. All you've got to do is come up with your own number and take it to the same local inspector who thinks you need 850 a year. And guess what happened? We spent years and years coming up with our own number, went up to the inspector who said 850 a year when he was a Labour inspector, and he said, we went with 750, I think. Mark Raffel went there, and with 750 in a contingency. And the planning inspector said, I think you should build 850. So I wouldn't be waiting for the government to change the numbers. I think we've got a plan for what the reality is looking like at the moment, because the builders ain't stopping, and we need the infrastructure planning now, not planning later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can't support the pause. If we're particularly honest with each other, it is abdicating our responsibility. Councillor Harvey said that localism is really important. We need to, in my view, have localism at the very heart of what we do, and we have to build the policies that will support a number. If we were proposing 50 houses a year, I don't think anybody in this chamber would have any problems at all. So what we are talking about is the number and the impact. Our job as the administration is to lower that number with good debate, great policies that will support a tightening of our ability to build and the developers' ability to build. We don't need top-down imposed upon us development numbers or development. And that's what would happen if we have planning by appeal. Already in the last 2 months, Oakley's lost an appeal, which was bloody to them. I've lost an appeal in Ashford Hill, and it is hurting where I live. That is not the way to plan for housing. It is not the way to build infrastructure first. How can we plan for infrastructure? Well, we've all agreed that's a great idea if we don't know where the appeals are going to come in and the requirement for infrastructure is going to fall upon us. I am not prepared to pause this. We abdicate our responsibility to all of our communities. If we say no, we're not in the game. We need to be in the game. We need to send a clear message of what we think our number should be and do everything in our power to work to that. Therefore, I implore you, a pause will be bad for this borough, bad for each of our communities, and really, genuinely, poor for the people who require our housing on our housing list. We have one of the biggest housing lists in percentage terms in the whole of the South. Awful. Are we saying we're pulling up the ladder, we've made it as a society? You, I'm afraid, are going to have to be in rented accommodation, live with your parents, or sofa surf for the foreseeable future because we've paused that future. Please, please reject this motion.
Right, Councillor Watts, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I support this motion that we get the sufficient evidence, then we can continue the local plan. I mean, this request was rejected at the last EPH, but we still had to proceed with initial site selection for 18,000 homes. We had no environmental climate change impact assessment, biodiversity study, no transport infrastructure study, no water supply and sewage assessment. We've heard the portfolio holder and the officers at the EPH meeting and said this is an evolving programme and this evidence will be added at the later stage. But, I mean, this is my fourth local plan and this approach is complete opposite to all the others where we've had the evidence up front, then we've made decisions. In this local plan, we're talking about 9,000 homes, many down south and between Basingstoke and North Waltham. We've got no transport assessment for that. Where is the money coming from for the rapid transport link? It's not coming from the county. They're making another 80 million cuts next year. And we might, at Junction 7, we might get a warehouse, might get a hospital, we don't know. Where's all our studies? I mean, it's already been alluded tonight from Mr. Jones from Dummer that Beggarwood and Hatchwarren already has a sewage problem. That's with just a small development on Kennel Farm. That's without the 1,800 homes at the golf club and Hanson Fields. And if you walk around Hatchwarren or run around Hatchwarren, this statement from Thames Water that we haven't had a sewage problem since November 2020 is completely wrong. So if you get around Beggarwood, you know we still have a sewage problem because you can smell it. The environmental bill, I think it's quite a good bit of legislation coming up from this Tory government actually. It's talking about, it has many good environmental protections. It says that we've got to conserve and enhance our biodiversity and we've got to look at net gains. It's not like what the leader said earlier, we chop down trees and bushes, then we grow, when we plant more thousands and thousands of trees. At the end of that development in 40 years' time, we'll have neutral biodiversity. This new bill is saying you've got to conserve, you've got to enhance that. So we should be adopting that in our local plan now, Madam Mayor. So we should be encouraging nature recovery. That should be adopted in our local plan as well. So we need all this evidence up front, not this back to front process. I mean, the reason why you're losing appeals in Oakley and Kingsclere is not because of the local plan, it's because of the absurdity of the MPPF, the 5-year local housing plan, local delivery number. I mean, you can't fulfil that. Doesn't matter whether you've got a local plan or not, it's all to do with that legislation. So it's all smoke and mirrors from the council leader. So I suggest we get the evidence up front and we proceed properly like we have done in the past. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Right, Councillor Tomlin, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a very serious issue. It's very concerning. We've just heard a very good points made there by Councillor Watts. Just for example, the Thames issue, in my motion, I talked about the situation in Bramley. So we've had it explained to us by not the Thames PR people, but the engineers team, the people that actually have to do the work, apply for the project money, funds, everything. They have a situation that they will, once planning permission is granted on a site, they will see that there's funding. So they will then start to kick in to provide the infrastructure, which we all know they're duty bound to have to do. But it's going to take 3 years, they say. So what do? We give planning permission to a developer, and in 3 years' time the sewage comes in, he's built out by 3 years. This is crazy. We need to plan. I'll take Councillor James's point. Yes, we need to plan. If you do a plan, it's based on information. You can't just guess. You can't have a wish list at this game. You need the information. Councillor Watts highlighted that as well. So what worries me, also the 5-year land supply, the developers, they control that. They do what they want. They will get this site, get that site, and we all know half the reasons. And I mean, the other day at the Manydown map, it's acknowledged that the delays for Manydown are unacceptable. Well, we know that's how we've got in this situation, but I'll move on from that. So the process so far, okay, I sit on some of the maps, and I was obviously a ward councillor. We're all ward councillors. We've been involved in some meetings about the local plan. We were given the information that the spatial strategy was already decided, the sites were already decided. We didn't have any input to that. It was just given to us. So when we talk at maps, we look at the policies. We're showing the policies how they're being marked up and worked on. But we haven't actually discussed how. We're backtracking because there is this sense of rushing going on. And we're not saying stop the local plan. We're saying pause to plan, pause to get the information, to make the conscious decisions, informed decisions, which strangely is a requirement that the government put on any plan makers. So I don't think we're actually asking for anything other than the rules or the guidelines. By March, we are going to have a draft local plan ready for consultation. And if it goes the way that the previous local plan went, any consultation, it won't change. It never did change. So I have no faith if we don't take this pause and work together. There are a lot of councillors who are in the maps who are actually very keen to try and get this right, not to be just preached to, this is the way it's going to be. So I just implore members to think on this, that we're not trying to disrupt the local plan. We're trying to make the plan correct and right for the future of the borough and all this environmental and climate change. Everything has to be brought together. Thank you.
Okay, we've got Councillor Carr now, and I believe it is his maiden speech.
Mayor? Lovely. Well, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. This is indeed my maiden speech. None of us like these housing numbers. None of us agree with these housing numbers. We have all voted against them. We are passionately of the view that 17,820 is too many and is not a true reflection of our need. But the question before us is what we do with that passion, how we most effectively oppose these numbers. And my strong and unambiguous view is that a pause is the wrong approach. Now, we have all been elected here to represent our residents, the interests of our residents. That's the key judgment for our actions. But what I put to you is that a pause of this local plan is contrary to the interests of our residents. It is not good for any of us. Now, if we ask our officers to lay down their pens and stop their work, the question is what will happen as a result? Now, that pen will just not be left idle. It will be picked up by bureaucrats and the inspectors in Whitehall, in Bristol, and they will start the process. Now, what we have to acknowledge is that pausing this process will end up with an abdication of all control. We will not be in a position to influence where growth in economic and social and housing growth comes in. We will lose control of the process, and we will end up with planning by appeal, and we have already discussed how that is contrary to our interests. So what I say to you is if you want to control where growth takes place in this borough, you have to oppose this motion. To govern is to choose, is to make decisions. And if we here tonight vote in favour of this motion, we are abdicating our own function, our own purpose. We are saying that we are not willing to make the tough choices on behalf of our residents that we have been elected to make, and we are satisfied that those choices would be better made by someone in Whitehall. I like Michael Gove, but I don't want him deciding where houses go in Basingstoke and Dean, and so I say to you, vote against this motion.
Councillor Harvey, do you wish to sum up?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Sam. I want to take control. My God, I said it. That's scary. Absolutely. I'd quite like to take back control of this process, and I guess that's the point, isn't it? Who is actually in control of this process? Because it sure as hell doesn't feel like the residents are, and I don't feel as a backbench councillor that I am either. I feel that this process is being rushed, and I still don't understand why. I don't understand why we are being asked to sit in a room to debate a site selection process alongside not having the evidence in front of us really to understand the decision and the debate we're having. Because when we sat in that room and started talking about the sites, we were throwing lots of reasons around as to the reasons why we don't want that site, and we don't want that site, and we don't want that site, and we don't think that's right. But don't worry about the transport assessment, because we'll fit that later. And don't worry about the water cycle study that you haven't got at the moment, because we'll work out that later. But we'll run a twin track, so you debate the sites, and the twin track will be at the same time we'll start doing the evidence, and we'll bring the evidence along a little bit later. Now, that is not taking control of the process. That is an abdication, actually, because the abdication is you start hares racing, you start a debate happening, officers are then tasked to go away and work up those sites, and those sites become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because the prophecy is that you wind up with 17,820 houses. Now, if we say we don't want 17,820 houses, that we would quite like to pay attention to the water cycle study, we would like to protect our environment and protect all of the other things that we care about, then you pause to listen to the evidence. That evidence is being worked up. And the pause isn't to stop the local plan. In a sense, what I'm saying is let's rework the local plan process so that when the evidence is presented, we can then make the informed decisions about which sites we would support, so that we do not have the sewage coming back up the loos of our residents in Bramley, so that we do not destroy the Loddon Valley, or for that matter the area of outstanding natural beauty, by debating sites there that developers can then use against us in an EIP. The idea of the 5-year housing land supply and this Project Fear thing actually doesn't wash, because that's an issue today. The 5-year housing land supply and planning by appeal is today. If we don't get the local plan right, we will then visit that on the future. We will have planning by appeal if the local plan is not done properly. And that's my argument, that I don't feel we are doing the local plan properly. Because until I get the evidence in front of me that says transport can be coped in Hatchwarren or Kentshott, or in Dummer, or in Oakley, and all the other places we're debating this, it isn't a true reflection of the evidence that we're having to make those decisions. It's not informed. It really isn't. And I don't want Michael Gove making those decisions. I don't want a planning inspector making those decisions. I'd quite like Michael Gove to help us by immediately telling us we can come up with the housing numbers and he isn't going to impose the algorithm on us. I'd quite like him to use the 2018 figures to start with that give us a figure of 342, as we heard earlier. Now, wouldn't that be a place to start this debate? Let us think the consequences of our actions. And that's why I've moved the motion with my colleagues this evening on the basis of saying the pause isn't to stop, the pause is to think and get it in the right order. And I believe the time involved in that, I didn't mean ask, well, how long do you want to pause for? Well, the pause is to get the evidence. And the officers tell us the evidence is forthcoming. So let's have the evidence on the table, debated and understood, so that when we start talking about the sites, we are informed. And let us genuinely, and that's the other bit about the 17,820 figures, I really believe that you're going to do your best. But your best, I hate to say this, probably isn't good enough. Because unless that 17,820 figure actually changes, then we are screwing the future of the borough. And I can't live with that, and I won't live with that. And that's why I'm making this debate, as passionate as I am. We just need to stop and think about the consequences of the order in which we are doing things. Let us get the evidence in front of us. The officers say it is forthcoming. I believe that will be imminent from the way they were talking. I hope it is. The Cabinet members already referenced the water cycle study, so it can't be that far away. I'd love to see that before Christmas so that we genuinely can get on with it. I'd also like to see the local plan review take on board the Environment Act, which will be before Christmas, and the planning bill reforms also now will be announced, hopefully, before Christmas, if you hear what the Spads are saying about where Gove is going on this. So there's an awful lot that can happen in the next couple of months that will actually set this process in a better footing, I think, for us to go forward. And I want a local plan that I can support. I want a local plan. Please don't take that away, that I'm moving this motion thinking that I don't. I want a local plan. But I don't want something that's going to be an albatross around our necks as members when we look back and say, God, I wish I never did that in 3 or 4 years' time, when we then condemn our residents to 17,820 units.
Okay. Right, we are now going to take this to a vote, I assume. So can the voting open, please? All of them are being recorded now because of the electronics. We're back. No, they're not? The minutes will say it. The minutes will record it. Okay, the minutes will state they're recorded, sorry. Okay, I'm going to confirm that the motion has not been carried. It's been rejected. There were 17 for, 24 against. Now, I made a rookie error. I should never have said 10, because I reckon we can squish it to 10 past 10. Are you happy for us to finish the final proceedings in 10 minutes? Rookie error, I'm never going to say that in future. Okay, right, so we get to the questions from members of the council. Just for the benefit of the newbies, it's 2 minutes for the answer, 1 minute for supplementary, and 1 minute for the supplementary answer. So the first question is from Councillor Phillimore, and I believe it is addressed to Councillor Raphael.
If he's a TBC, it is, yeah. I appreciate that we've had plenty of discussion tonight, Madam Mayor, on biodiversity. But I understand that the local plan update is considering draft policies that remove the biodiversity opportunity areas. These areas are identified as important areas for restoration and creation of wildlife habitats. In view of the fact that environmental factors are even more important to our residents, who's decided to weaken our policy on biodiversity and why?
Right, Councillor Raphael, are you TBC?
Can I thank Councillor Phillimore for his question? He was correctly informed, but I'm pleased to say that following what was said at the MAP and discussions I've had with the planning policy team and the portfolio holder this morning, biodiversity opportunity areas will be staying in the iteration of the local plan that will be moving forwards.
Okay, do you have a supplementary? Okay, no supplementary. Okay, question 2 is from Councillor Wooldridge, and it is addressed to Councillor Robinson ordinarily, so it's Councillor Golding because he is unwell.
That one, yeah. I'm happy to save time to do it as per order paper. Everybody's got it in front of them, so thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. The portfolio holder followed closely the steps the government had prepared in readiness to support those who are most vulnerable as we enter the next stages of recovery from lockdown. At the time of its introduction and subsequent extension, the blanket £20 universal credit uplift was a vital component to supporting those who most needed it. Since then, as mentioned in the earlier response, the government has announced a new £500 million household support fund, which will support millions of households in England, which will be distributed by councils in England. I apologise, I actually left that bit out of the first response. In response to the request at full council, the portfolio holder raised this point with our 3 local MPs and the Minister for Employment. The government has chosen to keep the uplift as temporary, and the council is putting in place a raft of measures as detailed in the answer to Mr. Lee's question, which helps mitigate the impact of this change.
Thank you very much. Do you have a supplementary?
With all due respect, it doesn't answer the question at all. I mean, what I'm asking really is what lobbying has taken place. Okay, you've mentioned it to a few MPs, but has any formal written lobbying gone on to ministers in the Treasury and in the local government department at Westminster? You know, this is an exceptionally serious issue affecting 11,000 of our residents in the borough. You know, if it seemed fit to lobby quite rightly on issues of the local plan, why isn't it seen fit to lobby on behalf of our most vulnerable people in this borough, and also many of our residents who are on low incomes, our teaching assistants, our carers, our health care assistants. It's, I just don't think the priority is right here. So I would like to do an answer as per the paper here, some written response, the written efforts of lobbying that have gone on, shared with all members, please, and if it hasn't happened, come clean and say it hasn't happened. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. And Councillor Golding, you have 1 minute to respond.
Councillor Tristan Robinson to get back to you on that, because obviously I'm not aware, as it's not in my portfolio currently.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we are moving to agenda item 21, questions to the Chair of the Cabinet. There are 17 meetings listed in the minutes. Are there any questions relating thereto? No? Okay, perfect. As per agenda item 22 and 23, we have no reason to exclude the press and public, as we have no confidential or exempt items for discussion. That, fellow members, concludes the business for this evening, and I declare this meeting of the Council over. May I thank you all for enabling us to get through the agenda. Thank you to all the officers, and thank you to all the teams in the Facilities Department. And I wish you a safe journey home. Good night and God bless.